variety of, from cattle to sheep and that. Does anybody here do agriculture as well?
We've got alfalfa fields.
You got an alfalfa field? Okay, so how about we change that question? Any agriculture consumed by humans? No?
Not at this time.
Any interest in doing anything along those lines? And the reason I'm asking is part of what we also do is we also support our local agricultural farmers within the state boundaries. We are strictly a New Mexico program that helps New Mexico farmers and ranchers. So if you ever had interest in maybe doing something like that, we would be happy to assist you with either production planning, possibly procuring seeds, whatever it is to help you might need. So I always like to encourage somebody that might have the space, because I'm also a big advocate of our communities feeding our communities. There's no need to send it somewhere else, and if we can feed ourselves more, the less we have to import too. So, big advocate of putting food into the senior centers. That's always where it's a special place in my heart, because I always hear my grandmother, you take care of those who once took care of you. So so keeping that in mind, I just wanted to thank you. All right, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Welcome, and would you like to introduce yourself for us?
Antoinette Lucero, Latino Farmers and Ranchers International. I'm here, just got here from Albuquerque, so I'm starting a little bit late.
So you work with Eugene and Rudy?
Yes, sir.
All right, that's what I thought. I remember seeing you.
I'm their next generation.
Good. Well, nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Tell them I said thank you for sharing your time with us as well. So, all right. Well, that being said, guys, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague here, Alena, and she's got some things. So we're going to kind of tag team this with you, but also today is very conversational. If you want to back it up, say, hey, you know what I just thought about? I got a question or something you said 5 minutes ago. Feel free. Okay. So this is about how we can help you understand and help you guide through these programs. One thing I also like to state is we are not regulatory. We're not the government coming on your farms and telling you what to do and how to do it. We're here to help you achieve the goals that you want to achieve on your farm and help guide you through those routes too. So, and I'd like to talk to you off to the side later. I'm familiar with who you are. We've never had the opportunity to meet. So.
Okay.
No, that sounds so scary. I think in a good way.
No, it is in a good way. It is in a good way. Not in my ancestry Sicilian way. Yes, sir.
Before you get going on the growing and the agriculture for producing, do you know of any kind of programs out there that because I wouldn't necessarily want to do it, but I would be more than willing to allow people to come onto their property to do something like that. I don't know if there's anything like that out there.
So New Mexico State University just relaunched the Land Link program. Does anyone know what I'm saying when I say that? They have a new fancy website that does matching of, what you do is kind of like almost like a Craigslist style. You put up information about your operation and what you're willing to allow there, right? So it has questions like, is it okay if people live there? Is it okay, if they do improvement on the land, and what would the agreements be? So you list your things, and then people register, and they can access all of those listings.
You know what's interesting is that you're familiar with Onyx Maps,
Yeah.
the mapping system. They've got a group already called Sharing the Land. So something similar to that. But if you have that link, you can share with us. That'd be great.
Yeah, let me actually.
Because that would be ideal. I know that in the terms of what we have in this month is
I have
availability for grazing opportunities for those because we don't have. So assuming one has their own panels and such, they could, have lunch.
I think what's cool about LandLink too is they help you with the forms to actually lease your land or to lease somebody's land. So it's all legal and you're avoiding problems in the future. So in MSU helps you.
Well, that'd be great to see.
I have the website pulled up, so I'll pull it up just so you guys can see. And the guy over there that's working on it is Wes Metlock.
Yeah. So I can give you his phone number and email as well. So his name is Wes Medlock. And his phone number is 901-486-5655. 1344.
You said Wes?
Yeah, Wes, W-E-S,
Med.
Med, M-E-D, and then Bach, Medbach. And his email is wmedlock, same as his last name, all lowercase there, at nmsu.edu. And he is the program specialist for LandLink. He would be in contact for.
And they just relaunched it, so there's probably extra resources, you have to get people plugged in, but you can see, like, create an account, when you create a land seeker listing, it's a matchmaking platform. But Wes would love to talk to you about it, if you are interested.
We also did record this event about land
Oh, great.
So it's on our YouTube channel as well, where this will be.
Good, so you've got everything else recorded, like you said about it. And Wes is a good guy. He's been in the scene for a while. He's worked in food hub, he's worked in farming, ranching, and now he's connected with this program through NMSU to help farmers find land such as this gentleman's offering. So that's great. So, any other questions before we move forward?
So that
Oh, good.
people could get together. 'Cause
Great.
We suggested at the end of his presentation a week ago at NMSU, and it was like, yeah, we want to meet the people.
Yeah, I think like keeping the relationships in those programs is pretty important,
Yeah.
right? So that makes good sense. Okay, so we wanted to start again, kind of setting the tone for what we're gonna do today. I'm sorry for that blue mic.
No, it's okay.
Is that better? Let's make that happen. I think it's better. So don't be distracted by that. We're not there yet. But essentially, our purpose here today is really, one, to talk about food safety in terms of the impacts on our communities, especially as it relates to our consumers. So we're going to talk a lot about what the institutional markets require. Right? This is a market-driven program. As we've said many times, we're not trying to impose regulation. We're just trying to make sure that everybody meets the market demand so everyone can be successful in those relationships. The second piece is really talking about some examples of food safety hazards and risks that you might run into as a producer, as a meat producer or distributor. And then the third is that we, again, really want to make sure that you guys all feel comfortable and equipped, should you choose to pursue becoming an approved supplier program vendor, to actually build fruitful relationships with the market. So understanding some tips on how you do that, the type of language they speak, what they're used to, right? Understanding the culture of institutional food, which is not the same culture as our community food systems generally. So the other thing we like to do is really ground us in some intentionality around why we're here. Does everyone have a copy of the agenda now? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to read, we have this thing that we call our food safety pledge, and it grounds us in what it is that we're accomplishing today. I'm going to call out or call in my colleague Kevin and see if Kevin wants to read our pledge this morning, since you guys are all new to me and I won't put you on the spot yet.
All right. Pledge. Food safety and growing food are interrelated. Food safety is constantly evolving as we all learn more. We learn from each other. We're here to facilitate conversation and share ideas. Each training is unique based on growers in the room. Each grower's experience is a piece of a larger puzzle that acknowledges cultural and traditional values unique to New Mexico. Please be mutually respectful as we navigate our way for a deeper understanding of food safety practices. Thank you for sharing this time with us.
Thanks, Kevin. So a couple things we're going to do in this space. If folks have ideas that maybe aren't sort of in line with the things that we're talking about, we'll either make a decision, again, we're going to be very organic in this, so we'll either make a decision to go there and deviate, right, remove our pathway a little bit, or we'll do what's called a parking lot. So we'll acknowledge what your question is, put it in the parking lot, and then we'll address it before we leave today. So I just want to set that level of understanding. Some people are very linear. This agenda is a guiding thing. We're not going to stick to every single bullet point. As Kevin said, the goal here is to really make sure that we cater to who's in the room. So, so we want to start out first, and I think I'm preaching to the choir, but right, here's our food system today. Institutional food relies on this sort of non-human relationship to a commodity food system. That's a really fancy way of saying the people have been removed from the processes, right? And so in that process, what happens is that risks actually increase, right? When we're feeding our friends and neighbors, there's less risk there. We've been doing that for generations. But when we are part of a system where we don't get to interact with the end consumer, what happens along that line is not good stewardship. And so really acknowledging that in order to make New Mexico grown, which we'll talk a little bit more about, but in order to make that safe and sustainable, we need to change this process into more of a value chain. So I think everybody here is probably familiar with the concept of a value chain, but the way I like to put it is just moving foods with value and values, right? So we appreciate everybody along the system that interacts with the food that we get to consume, and we uphold the values that we would have in any sort of relationship. And so that means caring for people financially, caring for their health, making sure people are acknowledged in their process, and that all leads to sustainability. And it's one of the big goals of the New Mexico Grown program is to move our institutional food system into a value chain way of looking at getting food to the end user, which in this case is kiddos and seniors mostly, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. Again, some of the goals we're making around particularly ranch to institution is to uplift this idea of a value chain, realizing that there's been so many disruptions in those sort of direct market opportunities for meat producers specifically, and there's a lot of regulation, right? And so how do we come back to a place where when institutions are making decisions about who they're going to work with, that's based on more than 2 cents difference on their bid, right? It's based on more than the lowest price. It's based on how they care for the land, what their long-term visions are, how they might share land with people. And so we are actually working really hard at the NMFMA with institutional partners to create what we call values-based procurement, which essentially assigns a monetary value to things that aren't monetary in nature. Anything to add about value chains, Mike?
No, I think you covered it. I think it's just, it's New Mexico taking care of New Mexicans. It's keeping the food in the communities, the money's in the state, which is also really important that we can help drive a better economy for our citizens and maybe give them a better quality of living, particularly ranchers and farmers who have been, excuse my language, but have been, I'll clean it up, crapped on for a long time. And this is where we pride ourselves in helping you put an umbrella over your head, and it doesn't directly make it land on your boots every now and then, but we're going to help keep it off your head.
So the one last thing I'll say is that in our network, because New Mexico Grown is really a community effort, there's a whole network, some might even say movement, of organizations and individuals working towards this same goal. So there's resources coming in on the supply side. So for example, we're working with the Kavera Coalition, who has various resources that they can provide to you that are actually production related. There's resources on the processing side as we try to create pathways, right? The state meat inspection program, that's a big one. We all know that that's going to come and change and hopefully improve what we're looking at, as well as bringing in some more of those regional distributors and looking creatively about how, we move product. Aggregation and distribution, TCEDC is here to support. There's food hubs all over the state that are driven by the same mission that are working on this. And then again, the markets. That's where we as NMFMA really work, is to, how do I put it, buyer education. Constantly engaging in buyer education as to why this is different, why the products are different, why the value of the product is different, and why working with the people is going to be different. So we can move on. I touched on this values-based procurement. We'll talk about it more as we get deeper and when we get a little bit more into the specific programs, but the idea is creating standards for purchasing that relate to health, to environmental stewardship, and to local economies. And so we're testing this primarily with the food banks right now, and the food banks are a great opportunity, particularly for the ranch to institution market, and they are really looking to change the narrative around the food available in food banks and food pantries to ensure that it's high quality and that it's locally produced. All right, I think I'll leave these, but don't be wedded to them. So the New Mexico Grown, the thing about New Mexico Grown is that it is a state subsidy program right now. So it's got 2 parts. One, all the buyers that participate receive a little bit of state money. They actually have to apply through a grant system, so we also support in that process. And then 2, we also encourage them to use some of their general budget. So the seniors, for example, Mike, they use their
NSIP.
Thank you. They all have different acronyms. NSIP, which is basically the same thing as like the federal school meal program, but for senior centers. So it's NSIP, NSLP, all sorts of silly acronyms you don't need to worry about. But when they're purchasing, it depends what piggy bank they're pulling the money out of as to what they ask you as a producer to do. So part of our work is ensuring that across every one of these institutions, So public education department, aging and long-term services, early care and education department, and the Food Bank Association of New Mexico, that they have standardized processes for working with you. So the same sorts of paperwork, the same sorts of product requirements, because not so long ago, you call a school, you call a senior center, they'd ask you for very different things. And so part of our work is trying to create what we call a standard procurement system operating around the state that enhances values. This is a slide with a lot of words. So let's open it up to some conversation. Why would anyone be interested in participating in a program like this? What are some of the benefits that you guys know of or have heard or might just guess? We'll open it up for conversation.
I would slightly maybe even tweak the question. Are you interested in a program like this? And if not, maybe why not? And maybe I can change your mind. So,
I mean, that's the whole point of the 3-year plan is to, at some point, have from the farmer market.
Access.
okay.
And so, to the point of access, cuts out a lot of the red tape with procuring any type of food product from it needs to go through whatever the bureaucratic red tape to any institution.
Cool. Well, part of what we're doing today is you're gonna leave here today with the information that you need to become a member of the New Mexico Grown Program and be placed upon what we call the approved supplier list. And this is where Alena mentioned that we're kind of lining everybody up and looking at the same criteria. Well, the state are now looking and purchasing off of our approved supplier list because we do things like this, or we have food safety training meetings for our agricultural farmers and developing these programs. So they're able to know that they're buying local, but they're also doing it safely. So we're gonna give you all the information and hopefully you come join us to the party because there's a substantial amount of money out there to get. And Alena mentioned the senior centers and their general budgets, the NSIP dollars. They also get the New Mexico Grown, but once those are exhausted, they're also now required to spend 3% of the federal dollars also on New Mexico Grown and Raised. So that's a great resource, and our seniors don't take the summer off either. They like to eat in July. So it's a really great place for you, so.
And just, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you guys are curious of the market potential, because that's a big reason. There is unmet market demand. So the senior centers, as we move into next fiscal year, have $1.1 million dedicated and then 3% of their general budgets, which I don't know what that number is, but I imagine it's pretty high. The schools are a little tricky because has anyone ever heard of universal healthy free meals by any chance? Just passed. It's going into effect this year, so every student in every school in the state can receive a free meal. The other part of that goal is that meal includes something produced locally. Actually, 3 things produced locally. But they're working on the rulemaking right now for that behind closed doors. But what we know is that it is going to require schools to scratch cook and buy local. And where they'll be buying local is through the approved supplier program. So there's huge market demand there. General estimate, probably a couple $1 million as we move into next year, but we will keep you updated as the rulemaking process finalizes and we get a better sense. And then early childhood education, which is Head Starts, preschools, daycares, not home-based centers now, but there's some work wanting to be made on that. They've got $300,000, and then the food banks have a little over $2.5 million to spend over 3 years. So they're a pretty significant purchasing power as well. And again, that's just like the tip of the iceberg. That's the introduction to your working relationship, and then we try to figure out how do we sustain that in other ways. What was your question?
I was just going to answer your question and say there's 2 things that really stand out to me about this, and one is that it's for all different sizes of operations, so meeting the needs of small-scale producers seems to be considered. And then the other thing is that it's value-based, but it also seems to make good business sense, and you can't implement your values if you don't have that kind of business sense. So.
Well said, absolutely. It's very much values-based, and the state buyers place a lot on location of the farmer. Where are they in my community? That's one of the top things they look at. Now, it is a world of business, so pricing is always looked at as well, but they're not looking for the cheapest price either, so you're not competing against the commodity places, the Shamrocks and the Cisco's and other places like that. They understand that you're a small New Mexico rancher and you nailed it there's no one too small. You can have 1 cow a year and still participate in the program, because the same rules apply to everybody. They're very, very simple, and like I said, we're gonna share those today. So it's just really through certain ways, through food safety, registrations, and things along those lines, that you can aggregate with other farmers. He may have 100 head a year and you got 2. Well, guess what? You can still participate in the same program and get the same pricing. So it's just good business too, so. Yeah.
Okay, I don't think so, I think those were, unless there's any-
So, over here now.
I'm gonna do the about the ASP real quick.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So Mike and I'll tag team on this. So New Mexico Grown is the state program for the buyers. What we operate at the New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association is called the Approved Supplier Program. And it has that name for a reason. There's a story behind it, and it's that back, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 years ago, I'm probably dating myself because I can't even remember, but we were working with school food particularly, and we'd go around, including up here to Taos, to the school board, and be like, hey, here's what should happen, you guys should buy local, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, that's all great, except we have this contract with Cisco. And it says it has to come from an approved source. And I was like, well, who defines an approved source? And they're like, well, Cisco defines an approved source. We're like, well, that seems tricky, right? Like, can't you be empowered to define your own approved source? So very smart partners around the state went about defining an approved source, and that is why it's called the Approved Supplier Program. It's kind of a funny name unless you know the history, but the goal is essentially, as we started this training, to meet the requirements and a little bit of the norms of institutional food systems through food safety. So some of the acronyms that we can throw out there include GAP. Who's ever heard of GAP? So thanks. Good Agricultural Practices is a certification program that's required by markets. It's not a federal requirement, it's required by markets. So like Whole Foods or Walmart or Cisco, they'll say, hey, to even touch your food, you gotta get all these expensive certifications. This is a program that sits right next to it. It's parallel to GAP. What we're doing is trying to build capacity for producers around food safety so that should you ever be in a position where you want to pursue a larger market, you can. It's not totally foreign. So we call it GAP aligned, for example, for our produce program. We also look at things like uplifting the fact that there's plenty of producers out there that are doing organic production without being certified organic, right? So how do we create those spaces in the market? So it's essentially a food safety and quality management program. Don't worry about reading all the text here because I will surmise it in a couple of quick ways. One, it's required by the institution. So believe it or not, when they process an invoice, so when someone up in the bureaucracy at PET or aging receives an invoice from a center, they look at the farm and then they look at the approved supplier list. And if you're not on that, that invoice gets rejected. They'll still pay you if they bought your product, but they probably won't call you again because they don't have a way to fund that relationship. So that's a big one. Two, we work really hard, as Mike has said, to make sure that this is a program that feels inclusive and accessible to everyone around the state. Depending on your context, it shouldn't matter, that we can help you create an opportunity within New Mexico Grown. Three, we've actually managed, I say that like it's a deficit, we've managed to create a new standard that the institutions believe in. And that is a huge mind shift. And so they trust it. There is integrity in the program. And so if sometimes things feel a little heavy-handed, ask us about it. And we'll explain to you why we came to that conclusion. But it's about maintaining integrity so that it can be the standard and we don't roll back into these federal requirements or market-driven requirements that don't work for small producers. And then three, it's all about community food sovereignty, right? And I think we've talked about that quite a bit here, and the economic generation that comes from that as well. Yeah.
I want to add to the third point there of what we do as far as the regulatory, why these things are there. One of the things that we've been able to do, and it is really, really cool, because I've been involved in this, I won't say since the beginning, but about the halfway point, and then it's exploded from there. But to see something, we're ahead of the country, guys.
Yeah.
We have the other 49 watching us because they don't understand how we're doing what we're doing and how we've developed a system that our state, our buyers, our farmers, our ranchers are able to operate successfully in. It's pretty cool to have New Mexico #1 on something that's not negative. And this is it, and it's because of people like you that we were able to do that with. And we're here to answer the questions, and if you feel like something's a little heavy-handed and you don't want to discuss it here, give me a call. Give Alena a call. On your agendas, you've got our
Yeah,
contact.
those are our real phone numbers on the front of us.
Yeah, and if you don't believe it, call me, it'll ring right here. And I'm kind of weird, I'm old-fashioned, came out of the board of grocery retail, so I answer my phone 7 days a week, and I do understand that farmers and ranchers, sometimes Sundays when they got time to call. So if that's your case, feel free to give me a call on a Sunday. I answer the phone. Go ahead.
Perhaps this putting the cart before the horse, but as far as the rules, what do the rules dictate in terms of, say you have a co-op of folks that are raising cattle, and one or two people are not involved in the program, but yet the person that is involved in the program is grazing. Is there some kind of stipulation that all parties need to be, involved in the program? Or is there a rule about the sourcing to that effect that, who's ever grazing the cattle needs to be?
So I'm gonna put the cart next to the horse. Okay, so grazing, no. Aggregating and getting cattle from someone that is not an approved supplier, yes, there are some. We tend to frown on that because, and we'll talk more about it, but there is a traceability system for these things. Because, like I mentioned, my background, I'm always here to protect you guys, and I'm always walking around thinking the sky's falling down. I want to know how I can best protect you guys. Through that are some things we're going to discuss here a little bit later. But as far as grazing, sure. You've got some pasture land that you can share, or someone's going to share it with you. By all means, please do.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk about it more, but it's when the processing of the animals come into play and the marketing and transparency and traceability in those systems that it becomes more of an issue. And we do try to facilitate what we call informal aggregation. So, neighbors working together. Like, that's the simplest way to put it, but with some standards behind it. Yeah, so we will touch into that in just a moment deeper. The one other thing that I wanted to mention again, in case it isn't hitting home, is that these programs serve kids 3 months old, first real foods, all the way sometimes to last foods in senior settings. And so if we feel heavy-handed, that's also, we're aware that we're dealing, Mike always talks about, kind of immune sensitive or immune compromised folks. It also serves people using community prescription programs for food. It serves, a number of different programs that we know people need safe quality food coming from. And so that is also what is behind the standards. And particularly for ranch to institution, we developed these standards through a series of roundtables with folks that were sort of in the industry and interested, all scales, all over the state. And we said, what makes sense? What are you already doing that wouldn't be too much of a burden that we can kind of formalize? And now we look at it and we say, okay, based on how last year went, what can we do better? And so we'll talk about that a bit more. But to demystify, and we're going to spend more time on this in a conversational mode, but the requirements for the program, they're on your flyers. Yeah, cool. The first and foremost, where you have your animal processed must be a USDA certified or federally inspected facility. That's not even our requirement. That actually comes from the institutions. It comes from the federal government. So we can take it up. We can take it up with the feds, but it is because institutional food, if they're using their National School Lunch Program dollars, so the reimbursements they get for each and every school meal, or if they're using their national...
NSIP.
Oh, NSIP, I don't even know what that stands for.
National Incentive Supplemental Program.
Thank you.
God, don't ask me the other one, because the other one is NSIL. And I think it's National Incentive Supplemental Lunches. We're going to go with that one. But it's the federal money.
I was curious with the law changing in New Mexico. Will that change once we have state inspections?
So we actually wrote the program because we're so convinced that the state inspection facilities are going to come on board and it's going to work. That will also be acceptable. So as soon as we have a state inspection program, absolutely, 100%. But right now, we don't have it. So it's USDA or federally inspected facilities. It occurred to me, and next time we come, we can bring with us a map of the facilities that we know of in the state. we tread lightly because these are businesses. And so we're not gonna outwardly recommend like, use this guy because they're businesses and it's your business and it's your decision. But we can help provide you with a list of those facilities. So that is the #1 requirement. And again, because they're buying with other funds. But when they cook, like they pull all the meat out of out of the freezer, right? They're not like, oh, this little pan is just for this money and I'm gonna give it to this set of students, right? So we just assume that it's all gonna get mixed together, so it has to meet the federal standard.
I wouldn't even say we assume, we just know.
We know this, yeah.
You know, there's no assumption there. They're gonna take that 100 pounds into Mexico meat, put it with the 1,000 pounds of the meat they got from Cisco, and it's all going on the same plate. The only difference is within the schools, I think it's the month of August now.
The month of October is New Mexico Grown Month, and so the challenge for our schools that participate is how much local can you get on the plate? And Farmington Municipal Schools got 99% local, only local meat, only local veg that week, and so we're continuing to up the ante with them and make it like fun and challenging and give them swag when they do well. Because again, it's those moments where we can really, because they do aggregate the product, right? But when your product can stand by itself, that's when the kids and the seniors can be like, that's different. It tastes different, it feels different in my body, and I want more of that.
And they recognize it, even the kids.
Yeah.
They're like, man, this is good. It didn't taste like last week's tacos or hamburgers or whatever.
Yeah.
And they acknowledge that, and we hear that from the lunch people that do the cooking of the meals. I'm old, I try to say, not say lunch lady, but I think y'all know what I'm meaning. And we hear that through them.
Food service professionals.
Thank you. I know MSIL and PE. That's what I think.
Any questions about that first one? Yeah.
Yeah, the federally inspected facilities, is that for processing?
Processing.
Processing.
Mm-hmm. And again, you can Google it and a list does come up because all these are registered entities, but we can also bring you guys a paper copy or email it over and you guys can make it available. It occurred to me last night as I was cooking dinner and I was like, I don't have time to do that. So yeah, I'm sorry for that. The second piece is, and this one's a little bit tricky, so the Food Safety Inspection Service, FSIS. You want to take this one? You know more about FSIS.
Yeah. So FSIS is basically, and those of you probably are familiar with it, I'm not sure, but FSIS is a registration for farm ranchers. What happens is you go to the USDA website, you look up FSIS registration, you'll register your farm there, you'll receive a number. Now for our program, we do need the number when you get it, but we will also be able to accept proof of registration, which you'll get immediately on. So what this does is it provides the sense of safety through traceability. Because most ranchers, they have the cows are tagged. Now through that FSIS registration number, through a processing facility or a rancher, we can trace the cattle back to, did they get their shots? What did they do? Where did they come from? And it gives a sense of security to the buyers, and it also adds a sense of protection to you ranchers, because if there was an issue and you go to FSIS registered farm or ranch, and there's an issue, you can say, well, you can look at my cattle, here's, you've got my list of tags, and, you see I've got all my shots, and we don't have this particular issue here on my ranch. So that is a requirement of the program to become a ranch vendor for New Mexico Grown, and it's free. And to my understanding, it's about a 10-minute registration.
I'm pulling up the form right now,
Oh,
so y'all can see what it actually is. Sorry for the.
And it's not intrusive, you're not having anybody show up on your ranch and say, well, let me see what you got going on here. It's just simply a registration for that. And then tying into registration, to be able to qualify for some future grants and be part of the program too, is you'll need to go to the NMDA's website and register for Grow the Tradition. And that's also free. And this just gives us the layers of traceability, much like we don't have any agricultural farmers here, but you said you were in agriculture, so I'm sure you're familiar with lot coding.
With what?
Lot coding?
Lot coding?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, well, lot coding in agriculture is how we're able to trace fruits and vegetables. It's through a series of numbers that present dates, fields, etc. So we're able to trace that backwards. Or forwards to a consumer. So we're able to add that layer of protective security for not only you, but also the institutional buyer. This is how we're able to get the state to participate in what we do,
Sorry.
is because of the fact that we have these fail-safes in place. God forbid something happens, we can trace that cow back to the farm.
Is this one way that New Mexico is leading the other states?
Absolutely.
Because other states, to your knowledge, do other states have similar batch lot coding methods?
So they do have the numbers that if they're registered with FSIS, but where we're leading it at is the fact that we're able to put this into our state institutions now. Nobody in New Mexico, except New Mexico, has where these can enter the state institutions unless it's through an extremely large processing facility. Go to Texas, you're not gonna see a mom and pop processing facility that gets USDA inspected, runs maybe 10 head of cattle through it a month. Not gonna happen. Here in the state of New Mexico it does, and we encourage it, and we look for it, and we wanna shepherd that. So where we need it is we're taking that same information, but giving it teeth here in the state of New Mexico. And it's not that it's any harder on you guys, hopefully we've done our job right to represent you guys and move it forward and say, look, this is what we're doing. Other states have these things, but we've put it together here, we've made it make sense, and now we've got buyers on board with it.
Has there ever been an instance where it's been utilized in like a form of recall or something to that effect?
It has not officially, but we do test it. We test our systems annually. We ask ranchers and agricultural farmers, test your system. And if you need help testing your system, that's what I'm here for. I'll give you a hand, we'll go through the process together, and we can learn how to test your system. So we have been very, very lucky in the state of New Mexico, knock on wood, that we've had no either agricultural issues or ranching issues that way. So, but we have those systems in place to protect those if it did.
And so, I can't get to the form right now without digging too deep and being distracted. So at the break, I'll pull up the FSIS form and we can look at it. Because there are two questions that tend to stump people. So I'm like, let's look at it together. But as Mike mentioned, the FSIS is really about distribution traceability. And so particularly if you are not, okay, so you have two pathway options. You're a producer and you want to sell your own product. You want to send it to a USDA, federally inspected facility to be processed, and you want to get it back and then market it yourself, right? That's option one. Option two is you send it to the facility and they market it for whatever they want and they have institutional relationships. You still get paid. It's a different model, right? So if you're in option one, you're sending your meat there, you're bringing it back, and then you're distributing it, you need to register for the FSIS. If you are in option number two, we still recommend it. It's free, it's easy, it increases your traceability, but it is not a standard requirement. So I want to make that part clear. Again, it's a one-page PDF. We ask you to screenshot it and send it to us, and the next year you have a number, and it's on file. Did you talk product liability?
Not yet.
Okay, so product liability insurance. Who here's got product liability insurance for your operation? What comes to mind when we say that? Is it like, oh man, more money, scary? Or hey, that makes sense. We hope it's on the hey, that makes sense side, because again, you're feeding vulnerable populations in public programs. So it is a requirement, universal. Minimum of $1 million, and I say minimum because it depends on your operation. It is not, like any insurance, it's not one size fits all. So you can get product liability insurance either through Farm Service. I'm sure Tyler can help us with some of these resources too. You can get them through Farm Service and Farm Bureau. You can also get them through your regular insurance entity, whoever does your home and your auto or your land. And then we just require annually quick picture or quick copy of that front page of your statement that shows how long your insurance is good. And that is, again, in case of a recall, in case of an issue, to protect you, particularly when you're working with another processor, right? So that you're protected in that relationship.
So is that
And I should have known
different
this.
from home liability insurance, then you get a separate?
It is
policy
different, it's for your business, yep. And sometimes it's listed as product liability, what's the other thing? General liability, I've seen it for a business insurance plan, but yeah.
And my apologies, I should have known this, prepared a little better. I know for agricultural purposes, $1 million policy is very crop variable, but it starts around $650 to $800 a year. You know, that is agriculture, so meat is probably going to be a little bit different, but it's not like you hear it's $1 million policy a year, it's going to cost you $1,000 a month. that's not the case. It's gonna be an annual fee that will be realistic for your business model of whatever it is you're looking to do, however you want to expand.
And I think there's some various grant resources that can help with cost share on that
Absolutely.
too.
In our CSS, some of that.
And then, any questions about project liability, why it's needed, how to get it? The next one, Mike referenced this, was we're trying to work really hard to bring NMDA alongside us in this process because we're not an agency, we're a nonprofit organization, and we do the work hand in hand with NMDA. And so part of that effort is to gather all of our folks together and say, how do we provide resources? So the NMDA Grow the Tradition program, does anyone participate in that or heard of that? It's a labeling program. So if you go to the grocery store, you might see it on products. Sometimes there's commercials on TV. But the idea is that there's Taste the Tradition. That's for locally manufactured products. So maybe some fiber products someday. But Grow the Tradition is for crops and commodities and food and things like that that are actually consumed. And it's a free program offered through the state. They also provide services around marketing your products. So like they'll help you with logos. They'll help you get into all of their listservs. There's lots of things. I've been learning more and more from Alyssa, like all the things that they do under Grow the Tradition, including opportunities for grants and stuff like that.
And that's Grow the Tradition within the NMDA?
Within NMDA. So if you Google it, they have gone to the web these days. It used to be a paper application, like last year you had to come and clean a paper one and mail it in. They've transitioned to a web-based application. I understand the process time is a little slow based on some producers telling us this, but again, all we ask is that you register, snap a picture or save a PDF of your registration page and put it alongside your application. Then next year you'll just be like, yep, I'm on Grow the Tradition, we'll double check with NMDA, and that's that. NMDA is also using the Approved Supplier Program to help verify local producers and some of the decisions and programs they're offering. So there's another benefit to being part of it.
So within the NMDA, you've got Grow the Tradition. And
Correct.
within that, they specialize on, say, something specific to ground shows or just want this over here, that would align within Grow the Tradition in the terms of something so local to this particular. New Mexico grown, that's fine, but something supposedly within this little radius.
And the nice thing about the Grow the Tradition, Alena and I were both on different committees, but it was folks that were registered within this program. We just did a grant review, and there was a full infrastructure review panel, which I was part of, and then there was an equipment review panel, which Alena was part of. And you're eligible for all these grants.
And they can assist with the branding and logo.
Absolutely,
graphic arts, marketing.
That's what they specialize in. I can help you to an extent with marketing.
Well, that's where the reviving brand comes in, because this is a brand that is, we're talking that my grandfather, he was born into it, so it's an old brand.
Yeah.
And that, I think there's a huge marketability off of that.
Absolutely.
Not only to reviving some of the, just be a good deal all around. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great program they've got, and as Alena mentioned, we work hand in hand with them. One of us, usually Alena or myself, probably once or twice a week, is in communication with NMDA with one form or another. And they're a big advocate and supporter of our Approved Supplier Program, and et cetera. So they've really become a great ally that works with us and on that program. So their program, Grow the Tradition, I can't recommend it enough. I mean, it costs you nothing to grow or to do, but a few minutes of your time, and it opens up a world of programs to you if you choose to, if you think you need them and want to participate. So.
And I want to acknowledge time. We started a little late, so I'm going to try to get through these, and then we'll take a break. We'll think about what we heard, and then we're going to come back for a lot of conversation before lunch. But yeah, in case you need to step out and you were depending on that, feel free to. Okay, this is very vague. Must comply with product labeling requirements. The basic product labeling requirements are the things that come out of any product that you're selling direct, right? So there's going to be lot coding information there. There's going to be all sorts of information. Right now, what we're trying to figure out, we're going to be doing an industry roundtable. We also have an event on May 2nd happening at Indian Pueblo Cultural Center. We can send out that info, although I think Nick closed the RSVP, but maybe we can squeeze a couple of you in if you're interested. What we're trying to figure out right now, and bear with me, It's about ground meat. So our buyers have been purchasing ground meat. It's one of the main products, no matter what, pork, lamb, beef, bison. If anyone knows a bison producer, there is so much unmet market potential around bison. It's not even
What
funny.
about hogs?
Yep.
I have a farmer that grows, he has.
Raises.
Yeah, he raises specific types of hogs, and they're a brand new family, the Milligan Farm.
Great.
So I need to connect
Yeah,
with you
yeah.
guys.
So yes, and we have an allowable product list. After lunch, I think we'll dig a little bit more into product demands, but I'll just say, people are buying more than ground meat, but ground meat is one of the top ones because it's easy to cook. They know how to do with it. They can sub it into recipes, and they can do it in large quantities. But there was an issue with labeling fat content within ground meat, right? And if you go to the supermarket and you're trying to buy ground meat, you know there's a price difference, right? When you're buying super lean, meat or 80-20 meat, that's a huge difference. And so right now we're working with producers, and if any of you want to come and weigh in to figure out what should we require for transparency of what the product is, right? Because that's apples and oranges. They're not the same product, yet they're being valued as the same product. And so we will make a final decision, and we will let you know, and it will go into effect probably for January of 2025, because we realize people have already processed meat. We're not going to change the process on you, but it is something that is creeping up in some of our markets, and particularly for the food banks, they're requiring this year as a test because they were having some challenges there. So the labeling requirements are pretty standardized, and we'll go over those a little bit more. They're just everything that would come from your facility, including you cannot repackage. So if you get something processed in one of those facilities, you cannot take it home and make sausage out of it and repack it. It has to be stamped on each individual package. That's really important. You can't do big production and split them for markets. I think that's the primary one that we've had to emphasize. Any questions about labeling? Okay. And I will say, to Mike's point, we have checked on some of these through some of our buyers. Again, it's a buyer-driven market, so we don't necessarily, but our buyers might be like, hey, I was curious about a product I got, so I traced it back. So it is happening, and all this information helps that be facilitated. So the big one that probably most of you have questions about are that, how do we call it local? What is New Mexico grown meat, right? How do we qualify that? So again, in response to producers and wanting to make sure that particularly the lack of processing facility wasn't a burden for y'all, because we know there's not enough. We know the bottlenecks in processing and the high costs and the wait times. We made a decision that producers have to meet 3 out of 4 criteria. And this is how it sits today. It might change when we get the state meat inspection facilities on board, because that would remove a barrier. But 1, the animal needs to be born and or raised in New Mexico. 2, fed and or finished in New Mexico. 3, slaughtered and or processed in New Mexico. And then 4, ownership needs to be maintained that entire time. So no selling it midway and then bringing it back and getting it processed. And again, that sort of optional one mostly applies to the processing, because we realize, especially like up in San Juan County, they're like, why should I go so far when just right across the border, they've got a meat processor there that can do what they need. And same thing on the east side. And so we're trying to also reduce, food miles and those relationships and costs for producers. But you need to meet 3 out of 4 of those criteria. And that is, kind of how we define what is local. And then it's indicated again on your invoicing and your packaging. Any questions about that?
What was number 2?
Fed and finished.
Okay.
And it's in the brochures too, I think.
And I know up there it says slaughtered or processed in New Mexico, I just want to drive home again, that it has to be federally inspected or USDA inspected processing facility. So in other words, I'm not going to go in the backyard and break down a cow and sell it to you, because I can't. Because once again, and this is where my food safety hat comes back on. We serve vulnerable population. We serve our children, we serve our seniors, we serve our immune compromised. And we want to make sure we're doing the best we can to mitigate these risks. And part of that is making sure we have federally inspected facilities, we have FSIS registration numbers, so we can do these things to make sure we're putting our best foot forward. Because we're never going to have a zero risk. Anything can and will happen at some time or another. But what we do have is a plan in place if something should. So keeping that in mind, this is why we have these asks that we do, but all of them are free of charge and they only require a minimum amount of your time. So that's just kind of why we do this. So once again, federally inspected or USDA certified processing facility, there's no gray area there. That's it is or it is not, and if it is not, you cannot put that meat into the program.
So two things, again, you can go over the state line if you need to, and two, if you have a processor that has interest in going through the process of getting inspection, we can help you connect with the people that do that. It's a big thing, like I don't take that lightly, and when the state inspection facilities come on board, that really will help. But yeah, it is an end of the line requirement that we have really no.
Do you guys know when the mobile matanza will be mobile? Anybody?
Do
We
we
look
know?
around.
October 24 is over.
October 24th.
Aiming for and on time at the moment.
And then it would be helping them get inspected.
Yeah. So, and this will be, once they're done with it, a USDA inspected facility, a federally inspected facility, so this will meet the requirement, the mobile Matanza, for our requirements here. Little bit of putting the cart next to the horse again. They do have the ability right now though, for you to store meat here. They actually have a separate freezer that is designated for that process. But within that, you then also have to act as your own distributor, and we'll get more into that piece of it here later. But for right now, they do have the ability to allow you to store your meat if you were to get something processed and you don't have a direct sell for it immediately. Maybe the senior center says, I'd be happy to take it, but my menu doesn't state I need that for 3 more weeks. You can store it here. Yes?
This might be more of that will be covered later, but has the line already started forming for using the mobile Matanza?
I know.
Let's see.
I guess it starts right behind you.
I think we have to get a little further down the road before we are taking reservations.
There's definitely a lot of people waiting, I could say that. There's waiting for this to happen.
Do you have anything up on your websites that says, hey, countdown, please watch, sign up here? Hey,
Yeah,
we're
I mean,
doing
we
this.
basically have a fact sheet with what all that entails, but we have an estimated date of October 2024, but nothing is like 100% set in stone. The utilities are being put in right now, so it's just a process and we'll get there. But I think maybe when Mercedes comes back with the lunch, she can speak to it a bit more.
I would say stay in touch and maybe give a call in September. Hey, you on schedule? Have you started a line yet?
Yeah, we'll definitely send out communications as we get into that process.
Also, the real mobile part of it will be freed up to go to the pueblos to do bison.
Yeah,
So great.
yeah, that's ready to go.
Yes, it's mostly not going to be a mobile Matanza, it's going to be a
Yeah.
stationary one.
The stationary meat processing
Yeah.
facility.
This is going to be a Montana.
Just a Matanza.
With an occasional field trip.
All right, well, let's take a break, move around, get some energy, get some coffee or some sugar, whatever people need. We'll come back in 10 minutes, or 25 after, so that we can talk again. We'll cover some more content, then we'll have lunch. It depends on how deep people want to go, but we'll talk more about the institutional market trends and food safety considerations for distribution. What are our requirements?
Thoughts, criticisms?
So far, so good, but no question came to mind, that's fine.
I have a question about
What's
the,
that?
do you pronounce it FSIS? Is that how you say it, or FSIS?
FSIS.
FSIS.
Okay. Seems so long.
We can go with FSIS.
I'd maybe seen the form, actually I have the form right here, as far as I know. Is there only one version of it? Because like you said, it was confusing to me. It didn't seem like it applied to
Can I see your form?
producers so much as like processors.
This is it.
Okay.
And exactly, that's what's confusing about it. So if you're a producer, and again, it is about the distribution, so can we pass this form?
Of course, yeah.
So generally, everybody is gonna fall into individually owned. I get lots of calls on this, like, how do I complete this form? This form seems completely irrelevant. It's an individually owned operation, and you just check that you're a domestic broker. You're not trying to ship anything overseas. Broker is a really crazy word that I think throws people off. That's on there. And then
Okay.
there's one more thing. Individually owned, domestic broker, meat products. Yeah, we don't, so poultry is not allowable in the program because there's not a graded poultry system in the state right now. So you'll check the meat products, individually owned, and domestic broker. Unless you're a co-op or you're a processor, then you maybe don't fit in the individually owned. But if you're an LLC or an individual operator using your social security number, you're individually owned. But yeah, there's one form and it's confusing.
And if you're a co-op file under, you know, have your co-op file for that number, because then you'll all be housed under one number.
And does that cost any money? Is there an application fee or anything? No, it's just.
Nothing but the few minutes of the time to fill out the application. That's one of the other things, we made sure that this is of no cost throughout the whole process for our farmers and ranchers, except for a little bit of time. You know, we don't charge at all for our services, whether it's to help you get through these, help you find the programs, or the programs that we do help you find. You know, there's no charge for any of it, so we've really been conscious about, you know, making this really, really accessible, and there's no hurdles in the way, whether it be financial or whatever.
And you said it didn't cover poultry?
What's that?
Yeah, poultry is not allowable in the program because we don't have a graded poultry system in the state of New Mexico. So, yeah, even though we understand there's a lot of poultry production, we're working on some pilots around egg production in the southern part of the state. And if that's successful, we might be looking at bringing eggs in, but not poultry.
But is it limited to other particular animals, just like beef? Pork?
Beef, bison, pork, lamb, and mutton products. And I differentiate those because it depends who you're talking to and how they hear that. So, yeah.
So basically, almost everything but chickens, and we're working on the eggs. So if the answer to the eternal question, it's the egg. It came first.
Way too many hours talking about eggs.
Yes, yes. You don't even know. I don't want to get into it. So I want to get into a little bit of talking about the culture of the food safety again, and I know we've.
She has a question.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Jennifer.
What does FSIS stand for?
Federal inspection. I have it on the slide.
Federal.
Food Safety and Inspection Service.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's what it is. One too many acronyms sometimes.
Oh, it'll drive you crazy.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
On your topics, the first one here, you said, why value chain? I don't think you answered that. My understanding is that you're mostly addressing production agriculture at this point, farm level, or are you looking at value-added production?
We are looking at value added as well.
We are looking,
Okay,
yeah.
So that moves the primary producer from the tail end of the value chain up to one of the more the processing components of the value chain. Is that right?
Correct. So we're looking at value-add product to come on. We're still working with, honestly, PED. It's part of Universal Meals. So we're working on sort of the standards that are going to be attached to value-add product. So I think it's a great question because it depends how you refer to value, what's adding value to a product, right? And the value chain, it's all very like philosophical if you want to go deep on it. But
Well, you're right, and it's
Yeah.
my contention that the highest value in the value chain is at the primary production. And as you add value margin to the components in the value chain, you add cost, but you lower the margin.
yes.
And the anomaly is that the producer takes the lowest value. So from my perspective, the important thing is, from a marketing perspective, how do you get the producer to get a higher value for his market?
Right.
Okay, instead of being a price taker, become a price giver.
Yes, exactly. Or a price maker, right? Yeah.
And that's part of what we're about, is to help the farmers and ranchers do this, where we talk about the local distributions, a food hub, or whatever, or there's direct delivery allowed now where the farmers and ranchers can make that dollar. In the world of agriculture, it's 14 cents per dollar that a farmer receives. And that's just shameful, that's a crime. And because they incur every increase of cost, they incur everything else along the way, it's the same for the ranchers. So what we've done, what we see as the value chain is for us to be able to come in, introduce you to these programs, help set things up where you as a rancher can now go to a local processor or someone within your region, get your product processed, and then sell it at a value-based price. Because within our program, our buyers are not looking to cut your throat. They want to make sure that you are getting a fair price. And I will go out and stand out in front of each and every one of you, and if they came to you and said, well, we can't do it for that, can you do it for $5 a pound? I would ask you to make me your first phone call. Because my title technically is the value chain coordinator for the state of, or for New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association. Part of what I do, I don't necessarily get involved in pricing, but I help protect pricing to make sure you're being treated fair. Now, I may not be able to affect a change on that $5, but I'm gonna get to the bottom of why they're wanting to ask you to, say, cut $1 off the price or whatever. What is the reason behind it? That way, at least we have an understanding, and now we know moving forward, okay, we're gonna make that sale because we committed to it at that $5 or to that sale. But, we're gonna shift our product over here now where our product is more valued at, say, $6.50 a pound. So within our program, there is the value, there is the chain throughout it where we're adding pricing, protection, while all at the same time feeding our communities and keeping the money within the state and hopefully keeping it more in your pocket. That's the goal of this whole program.
And the program really did start as a direct marketing program, so I do want to be clear, like the roots come from direct marketing. Producer, institution. What we've learned is that doesn't work for every producer, nor does it work for every institution. So we're balancing issues of access in highly rural communities where they're like, a producer's not gonna drive 200 miles out here to Quemado to bring me a tiny order of beef, right? And so we're like, okay, we're gonna need to engage values-aligned distributors. So in other words, small operations. And right now we've got 2 distribution partners and they're none of the big guys. They're little like food hub style things that are operating. And so we realize we have to build up business along that chain to deal with issues of access, while, as Mike said, trying to preserve price point because it's not a competitive price-based bid. And then the other thing that's within, particularly in the ranch institution, is there's a real focus on what USDA defines as socially disadvantaged farmer and rancher, which is just like the worst term on earth, but we have to use it, right? It's the grant speak we all have to use. But there's literally a preference, and what I mean by preference, I mean when they evaluate bids, they'll be like, oh, they're socially disadvantaged, top of the stack. Oh, they're tribally operated, top of the stack. So there are some things we're putting into place. Oh, they're a small farm or a small ranch, top of the stack. So they're actually figuring out metrics on the back end of how to pay more for things coming from small producers versus coming from a processor, for example.
And the nice thing about it is with that New Mexico grown money that all of our partners receive, not one penny can be spent out of state. 100% of it has to be on local New Mexico product. So that is something we fought really hard for, and it's working. That's what this approved supplier list is about. Because now we can safely say not only are these a safe farm or a rancher that has food safety values in place, but we can also tell you 100% we know that they're a New Mexico farm or a ranch. Thus keeping everything within the state and keeping that value that you're talking about, keeping increasing and keeping it growing, because let's face it, at the end of the day, the money should be in your pocket, not Cisco's.
And one other thing we'll talk about later at an ICU is that it also is only for the use of the food. So they can't reimburse for transportation. They can't reimburse. So as an individual producer, we work with you to bake that into the price of what you're offering. But the idea there, the state, the state wanted to remove people shaving off admin from each one of these, right? Oh, now it's going to the institutions to process your invoice. And so, yeah, it's dedicated for food and New Mexico food.
So, but when you're talking about...
Well, just 1 second.
Speaking of pricing, are you a resource for that point where we're deciding, we're making business decisions based on price per unit? Can you give us going rates?
Yes and no. I can give you an idea of what product is, but we really pride ourselves and not setting pricing. Pricing is driven by the farmers and ranchers. It's dependent on what is it do you need to be a profitable farmer or rancher. And with that, I can help you. There's something in the industry called ROI, return on investment. I can help you cost things out, look at things. What is it do you need $6 a pound or you need $10 a pound? And we can look at these things and determine what is a fair market value for your product. So I'm not gonna say, well, you gotta sell it for $7 a pound because everybody else does. Well, not everybody else is your farm. They may be 150 miles down south or to the west or whatever. Your value is right here in your community, and you have grass-fed, you've done this, and just what are the values of your farm, so then we can help you learn and look at models of other farms that maybe this is where you need to be, but I'm not gonna say $7 a pound.
We do collect some aggregate data through a thing called the Local Food Data Portal, where the institutions input their invoices. And so we get some average aggregate data on product pricing, so we can give you a range. But again, to Mike's point, that's tricky, because each of you determine the value that you're adding to your product, whether it's distribution, whether you're willing to come into the cafeteria and do some conversations with kids, whether you have promotion that can go into the cafeteria. These are all requirements within New Mexico Grown that add value to you as a producer trying to bid in. So, but yes, we have some range information, and I'll just demystify by saying, you know, right now the range that we've seen, and Mike can verify this, but it's about $4.50 as a low end for a commodity grade product coming from a processor, up to $14 a pound for a grass-fed product for ground beef. Again, that's only ground beef. And we'll have more updated data at the end of the fiscal year, so that's June 30th. And we steward that data. We do not ever give operation-specific data to anybody anywhere, because that's everybody else's business. But we do want to be able to provide some sense of supply for the end as well.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Yes, sir.
It sort of answered my question. When you talk about the ROI,
Right.
I was wondering whether, when you're talking about value-based pricing, is it cost plus perceived profit?
Yes.
As opposed to market orientation?
Yeah. So the one thing I deal with, is that when I work with farmers and ranchers and we talk about their pricing and what they're selling stuff for. And my favorite story is an organic blueberry grower, or blackberry, I'm sorry. We can't grow blueberries. Yeah, we can't grow here, I wish.
Wow.
But yeah, he could have got the money.
Very expensive.
That I'm gonna talk about. But I was speaking to a conference and I asked, much like you folks here, sir, what do you grow? Oh, I grow organic blackberries. Okay, great. Do you mind me asking what you get for them? He said, and this was several years ago now, mind you. He goes, oh, I get $14 a pound. And I was like, okay, good, you know what, you don't need my help right now. Good luck, God bless you, and if you need me, I'm here. You've got my number. $14 a pound is a great price. And then I talked to a couple other farmers, and it's still running through my head. Now I go back, sir, do you mind if I ask what is a good what is a good weekend for you at the market? About 100. Okay, that's $1,400 for the weekend. I mean, that's not bad, but it's a short season. You know, it's not going to pay all the bills, but you can have a good 6-week run. No, about $100. He took the rest home and fed it to the chickens.
Price of too high.
So my question to him was, well, sir, would you ever consider going to say $10 a pound? I can make one phone call for you and move your entire crop, because there is a market for this product at $10 a pound. And he's like, I get $14 a pound. And I went back, I couldn't get past 14 with him. The moral of that story is volume of sales also affects your pricing. And it would affect what you're looking at your ROI. So that answered any more of that.
Well, now, can you create a clearinghouse?
Can I what now?
A clearinghouse, a database clearinghouse? Where you can say, there's a market for $10 a pound blue blackberries here, and all you need to do is supply into it?
So at least with the institutions, there's a couple challenges with that. And we can dive more into it because I don't want to be too negative about it, but institutions, it all comes down to how they write their menus. And when they write their menus and get them approved by the state, because they have to do that, to serve a menu, they have to get it approved. And if they haven't engaged in any level of production planning with the producers, they don't know what's out there to write the menus, to create the demand so that there's a plug-in for the purchase. And so right now, with fruits and vegetables, they've been doing subbing in, and with meat too, right? This is why ground meat, as I said, is the top product. They just take their standard menu and say, we're gonna add local to that. Or on a fruit and vegetable, they just say, stone fruit. And then they can find whatever they can find. So to a certain degree, that might be possible, but the technicalities of institutional procurement and the number of people and bureaucracies that have to oversee that don't allow us to do that in a way that aligns to the production season, which continues to be the challenge. I don't know how else to put it, except maybe you have a better way of putting that.
Well, I would honestly say the short answer is no, it doesn't exist, unfortunately.
I know it doesn't.
Might give you a recommendation here in a moment, but the reason, to add on with what Alena was just stating, you're also not gonna get your fair market value, because now you're in a clearinghouse, right? So now you're taking those chickens, if you've got 3 or 4 chickens, you're gonna get $1 a chicken. I'm just example. As opposed to if chicken was part of the program, maybe you get $5 a chicken, something like that. Now, what I would recommend though, and I had several farmers and I helped them go through this during the pandemic, and it not only kept the lights on, but they were profitable through the pandemic, was Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah.
Extremely great place. There's no restriction on things that you can sell there. You can sell things like you mentioned, a clearinghouse of animals or produce or things like that. It was, and all you do is you get on there and say, hey, I'm open for business, I'll be over here, or here's my address, stop by from 1 to 3, this is what I got. And they can reach out to you through that way. Through within the state, there's just a lot of obstacles, and I'll be completely blunt, a lot of red tape and politicians in the way. You know, we haven't fought that mountain yet. We haven't climbed that mountain yet.
But you can do it regionally. For instance, Taos County can set up a website as a clearinghouse.
Yeah, and I think that could be more of a private thing where, you know, and I'm just gonna say you because you and I are the one talking about it right now, where you would be able to say, hey, this is my clearinghouse and anybody welcome to come here and sell it. And if you wanted to do a small upcharge of 5%, 10%, so you're making it worth your time, I would encourage that. Making it a private-based thing, because now we're not involving the government. So if that could be the grassroots movement of that, and then to be honest, once the model starts becoming successful, it starts perking up ears. And it starts the conversation. So just honest and real blunt talk is, unfortunately, it doesn't exist within the state right now. But I would be in favor, and I would help support something individually or personally ran that supported a community, a county, etc. I would lend my support to it and share the information with my farmers, because like I said, I work at the entire state. The only boundaries of my office is the state line. So just food for thought for you there.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other questions?
Well, speaking of the $14 a pound, is that what you mentioned that the upper range was for the?
Upper range for, again, institutional markets, not applying to necessarily values-based procurement. So it differs by institution, differs by the actual person, the buyer, right? Like here in Taos, I'm gonna say, your school is so supportive. It is incredible. The market opportunity here is not matched in other communities. They are willing to talk price. They are willing to be flexible. You also have daycares and early childhood centers here that are in the program that are excited, and your senior program. So you've got the whole trifecta, and you've got good buyers. And I hate to say that way. Sorry buyers, if anyone ever sees this, but you've got buyers that are, you know, aligned with those goals and are willing to pay a little bit more. When you're dealing with markets like Albuquerque, Las Cruces, the big ones, it's hard to get price competitive because of the volumes. But yeah, around 14 and going into mid-range markets, but it differs by school. And that's why we don't get involved with pricing, because we want to let that happen. We want them to be like, hey, we're going to pay you $2 more a pound because you're my neighbor. And it actually does happen. We hear stories all the time. We collect data on this all the time. And so, yeah, 14 for those larger scale markets, Some of the really tiny ones, we don't have a sense yet. And the distribution is part of it. So what I love about the program, as Mike has said many times, is it really is about creating local, regional hubs around the state. Because that's just how the economies of moving food, right? Like, what sense does it make to ship it from Las Cruces up here? That's crazy. That's crazy for so many reasons. And so where a buyer could do that, we don't encourage that. We always encourage the in-person relationships first. We have events throughout the year to do that. We do marketing support around that. But yeah, the range can go higher than that, but that's the documented price in those larger food systems where we're getting their invoicing.
And 14 is the end of the rainbow kind of pie in the sky price. I will just be honest, without setting a price now, camera on mute, probably the range for ground beef typically right now is about $7, $8 a pound, in that range. That's just the information I've gathered from other ranchers now, but I didn't say that out loud either. Because somebody may come at you and say, well, I've got monies for $6.50. And that's where you need to make a legitimate business decision. Well, are you gonna say no? Because you're not getting that extra 50 cents to $1.50? Or are you gonna realize that this is a value for you because it's in your community? And you have a continued sales, not just a one-time sales.
Right, that's the big one.
Because that's the other piece of it is, you might get that $8, but then, you know what, they might not call you again. But if you're in the range of, say, $6.57, you know what, I can get a great product and I'm gonna keep going to visit. I'm gonna keep calling Mr. Romero over there. He's got a great product, I love his product. And I wanna continue to purchase from him, because he also fits my budget. You know, we talk about the value-based and we want you to have more and more, and we are, we're getting you more. But we also have to understand at the end of the day, they are operating a business too. And so we want to make sure that you are a return customer, not just a one-off customer.
And we'll talk a little bit more about those trends of getting set up as a vendor in those systems because, again, there are people on the other side and people like the path of least resistance. And so if you are able to meet their needs and be responsive, also maybe add a few values, again, like I said, of connecting with kids and doing things like that, they want to use, they're incentivized to use one vendor. It's less paperwork, it's less bureaucracy. Once you get in the door and do that work, there's a retention there that occurs, and we see that time and time again. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. It's only 11. We can eat lunch, we got plenty of time. Do you want to eat first, so things don't get cold?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we're gonna, in order of giving everyone nice warm food, I think once food is set up, we'll do lunch, but let's start on some of the conversations around culture and food safety and
Yeah.
people engaged.
So yeah, there's a couple of things coming up that are really important for everyone to understand and why we do things and then what we do when we do them. So the first thing is we mentioned the culture of food safety. We've already touched upon who are customers, who are end customers, the young, the old, the immune compromised, etc. So the culture of food safety, without getting too far into it, it goes back to, there's some rules dating back to the Cosmetic Act, as funny as that sounds, back to 1937, I think it is. And it talks about how it's illegal to sell unadulterated foods into the system, etc. And then when FSMA was brought in, which is mainly around agriculture, but nonetheless it's a 2011 law that states it's illegal to sell, unknowingly sell now, unhealthy foods. So this is where when we talk about getting an FSIS number or something like that, allowing yourself traceability, that's how you protect yourself. So that being said, we've already talked in the introduction some of the goals and that, so I'm going to jump a little bit here to some of the food safety considerations and concerns. So some of the things we want to look at are temperature controls, sanitation, food contact services, and worker health and hygiene. The first of those are temperature controls. Now we already stated that the TCEDC.
Nope, TCEDC.
The center.
TC something.
The T.
We got the TCEDC.
Whatever, the T here, the T center will allow you to have free freezer space, and I think Mercedes, is that free of charge, or?
Absolutely not.
Until I can get back on everything.
Exactly.
Okay, so there you go, now you've got free storage here, so now we're, because they do temp checks here. Okay, but what we're really looking out for you on your end is, so once you receive the product back, is that if that's your model, and you choose to get the product back, that's where we've asked you to get your FSIS registration number. But now we're also looking at how are you gonna deliver direct to the consumer, or the customer.
Well, and if you're not storing here,
Yeah, or if you're not storing here, where are you storing? And if you, are you doing temperature checks, are you keeping it at the right temperature, et cetera?
and I've had,
Go ahead, no.
I've had people ask, do you need a deep freeze freezer? No, we're gonna recommend a commercial grade, and make sure that you're not like plugging it into an overburdened power strip outside in the sun, right? Because if you deviate outside of the range of temp control, you're required to state that. It's no longer a safe product that you can deliver to end market, and so we would recommend a commercial grade chest freezer at a minimum, but some larger producers that have participated in the program are investing in more infrastructure, right?
Everybody done? All right, so we're looking at temperature controls, product-specific temperatures and things along those lines, but also sanitation. And the sanitation is a big one, because when we talk about the immune compromised and the vulnerable populations, we need to know that not only are you getting it processed through a USDA or a federally inspected facility, but then when you receive it back and where you're storing it, or here, wherever, what are the procedures of sanitation? And if you're coming back here to pick up your product to then go deliver it to the senior center here in town, what is the process of, how are you getting it there? I don't think anybody here has a refrigerated or frozen truck, do they? Yeah. So more than likely it's going to be delivered with.
Yeah, how are you gonna do that? Yeah, what would you do?
How would you get it to your buyer? And to be honest, an ice chest is fine. I'm going to ask you not to get that 99, well, it's probably $3.99 now, that old styrofoam one. Invest in a decent ice chest. And most of us probably already have one, but I am going to ask you if you have the ability to maybe have an ice chest that is just designated for delivery. But if you cannot afford that, and if that is a hurdle for you, then have a procedure of cleaning and sanitizing that ice chest before a product is placed into it. Okay? And if you need help with sanitation procedures or products to use, I would be more than happy to help you fill out and make some SOPs and decide on what product. But the long story short of it is one of the best food safe, food grade cleaners there is. It's just plain old dish soap. It's a food grade cleaner. We all do our dishes and then we eat off the fork, right? Off the plate. And then there's food grade bleaches and things like that. But when we talk sanitizers, it must contain the word food grade or food safe. Generally it's food grade. I don't want to get into splitting the hairs on the definitions, but there is a silly difference, but both are acceptable. Okay, so it needs to state that. And then when we talk about food contact surfaces, this is always a fun. What's our largest food contact surface? Anybody?
The table.
Table?
The counter.
Counter?
Counter, table.
How do we get it on the counter?
Our hands.
On the table? Our hands. Okay? Making sure we're washing our hands and when we're packing things and things on. Now I know on the beach you're going to be getting in and you say, well, Mike, isn't that overkill because it's already packaged? True. But I'm going to relate that back to the 2010 Rocky Ford Cannonball outbreak. Okay? That was because the people, unfortunately, 33 people lost their lives over that. It was because they didn't wash the melons or they didn't wash the surfaces. Because everybody's like, well, I don't eat the outside. Right? It's the same thing with the package of meat.
Yeah, how do you open a package of ground?
So if you're not using clean hands, a clean utensil, whatever, so if you're not packaging with clean hands, everything, so if you're out in the chicken coop getting some eggs and you go in and load up your packages of meat to do delivery, please wash your hands first, It's those type things, because what's on the outside of that packaging is now on the inside of it now too.
And that comes down to institutional food norms too, right? So they're gonna load, they don't have endless storage. They might be mixing it alongside another product, right? Like that's already prepackaged. So making sure that those packages are sanitized, and again, when they open them, they're moving fast, they're cutting things open, they're just dumping it in. Yes, there's a kill step, we acknowledge that, but their hands are contaminated and then they go do something else. It's just making sure that we're helping them to be safe, right? Knowing that there's another party involved, and then with the ice chest, same thing, and also like market demand. You know, I mean, you probably don't want to receive a package of meat with blood all over it. I know there's nothing wrong with the meat inside. At home I do that. But, you know, your institutional buyer might look at that cooler and be like, wow, that's not okay, right? So you want to make sure that you preserve the integrity of your product too, and how it's presented.
Absolutely. Any questions on that portion of it? Because I think she really hit the point where it has a kill step. We acknowledge, we cook meat, especially in the schools and the senior centers. But then again, it's also the hands, perhaps the knife that they use to open it with. Now, I'm praying that they wash that off before they go cut tomatoes. But we always gotta look at the what ifs. And if we can wash our hands before we load it up, we have done our best to reduce contamination when we put product into circulation. So, the last one here, before we go to lunch, because I see it set up already, quickly is worker health and hygiene. Is anybody here lucky enough to have workers during the season? Family members? Okay. Well, you are your workers then, so only thing I would say to this real quickly is, once again, we already talked about washing hands. I always talk about, now this is when you're doing your deliveries, because now I'm going to hit the business side of this for you guys. Clean and appropriate clothing. Don't show up with cow shit on your boots. Sorry for the language.
Wear your church boots.
Yeah. So just clean and appropriate clothing when you're doing your deliveries and that, because you're ranchers, a lot of the worker health and hygiene doesn't always necessarily apply that it would to an agricultural farmer, that it would to a rancher. So when we talk about the business side of it, clean and appropriate clothing, clean and sanitized methods of getting the product to your consumer. And I really can't think of too much in there to time to
I want to underscore two things. The distribution, I guess they're both related. He threw out the word SOP. Who knows what that means?
It's the way that you have a procedure of how you're handling stuff.
Standard operating procedure, or if you want to think about it as an average person, like a recipe, right? You might know how you do things every time. Like I know how to make chili stew from my brain, but if I need Mike, my helper for the day, or my daughter, I might need to write it down, right? Step by step it. And so it's taking that knowledge that you're already doing, writing it down, and Mike always says in a way that you can commit to, right? Like don't overdo it. Don't add steps that aren't necessary. Make sure that it is accurate, but not overdone, because then you're beholden to whatever you write out. And if you're not doing that, then you're violating your own policy, which is
my quick example to that is, and I'll go back to hand washing. COVID taught us that we have to unfortunately teach people how to wash their hands again. So now we have to have an SOP for hand washing. Step 1, use clean water. Step 2, use soap. Step 3, 20 seconds birthday song, whatever you want to say. Step 4, dry your hands with clean disposable towel or a reusable towel. And then step 5, if it's a disposable towel, throw it away. 5 steps now to wash your hands. That's an SOP for hand washing.
Step 6, put on your gloves.
If you have gloves.
First let them dry.
But now if I gotta tell you to have an SOP, how, when we talk about health and hygiene and clothing, if I gotta tell you to have how to put on your pants in the morning, I don't want you working at my facility. All I'm gonna now state is wear clean and appropriate clothing. Moral of the story is don't SOP yourself to death. Think about something. Do I need to have an explanation how to do this? And I always pick on my granddaughter. You know, think of my granddaughter's coming to run your facility. And you probably don't want that, but she is a good, hardworking young lady, but she knows crap about farming or ranching. So just look at it that way. And there's not a lot of SOPs for a rancher that you're gonna need. As a matter of fact, I would say maybe a half a page, if that.
I think it's the distribution.
The distribution piece, the cleaning of, sanitizing of, delivery method, because like I said, right now, they're not set up to act as your delivery method yet. They can store for you, but you're gonna have to act as your own direct delivery person right now here in Taos County. At this time, so we wanna have an SOP on how to clean our coolers, how we make sure that they're at the right temperature. And to be honest, the right temperature is as easy as going down to Super Save or wherever and asking them for some dry ice. They get deliveries 3-4 times a week there. And guess what comes packed in dry ice? And they'll give it to you. Ice cream, TV dinners, frozen pizzas. They get big shipping containers full of dry ice. And I happen to know the manager there, Jesus Martinez. Tell him I sent you and tell him you want some dry ice.
So again, you might need an SOP for your cooler. Another thing to consider is where do you store your coolers, right? Making sure that if you're storing them in your shed, and we all have mice and rats and things like that you have a process for cleaning them. If you see any of that, are you putting it in the back of your truck? Is the back of your truck, did you just haul manure in the back of your truck? Right, like things like that. Just making sure that you sort of document how you're ensuring that the outside of your cooler is staying clean as you get the inside of the product out. And then, yeah, so I think that's the one SOP. And then on the temps, if you use dry ice, you're good to go. But one thing we did see consistently with meat product particularly, it left the facility frozen and it arrived to the end user slushy. So that's gonna really upset a buyer, right? Say it's ground meat, now it's squishy, they can't refreeze it for product integrity and food safety, and it's not on the menu for 3 days. So again, it's halfway about the buyer relationships, but we heard this from many buyers in every institution. You know what? I ordered a frozen product and it is not frozen when I get it.
Quality assurance.
And so you really wanna hit that one home. You can buy those Probe thermometers, whatever you need to feel confident that you did your due diligence, because maybe you dropped it. And then maybe the person that received it left it sitting on the counter for half an hour while they put away produce. And then your meat, right? So it also is just about maintaining your product integrity and quality.
And we'll cover more of that.
I want to emphasize that.
Yeah, that's right. We'll also cover more of that after lunch too, but that's really where it's gonna be important on having a signed invoice from your end customer.
Yeah.
Because now they've accepted it in good faith, it's, you have delivered a product that meets their standards. So always making sure you're receiving the signed invoice, but don't wanna steal the thunder for after lunch,
Thanks for
so.
kidding.
Are you done cooking over there, young lady?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, lunchtime, guys, help yourselves.
All right, so now we're going to continue in sort of a conversational mode here, talking about institutional markets. So I think first and foremost, I guess I'd love to get a sense in the room if people are interested in learning how to apply for the Approved Supplier Program. See a couple heads, cool. We'll provide direct TA for you all when it comes to actually submitting the application. We went over the requirements. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the market. So step one is becoming an approved vendor, but that isn't the end of the line, right? We actually have to sustain functional purchasing relationships with folks. And so as I started out, I'm proud to say that particularly up here in Taos and in the county, there's a lot of demand that is unmet. In the sense of there's not a lot of distribution coming up here from Albuquerque terribly consistently, which is a challenge for food access, but a benefit in terms of producers here that can figure out how to supply those markets. As we talked about, the Public Education Department oversees programs that are preschool, so publicly funded preschools. It's a little bit different than like separate pre-K centers, but preschool through high school. And that does include summer food. So some of them purchase summer food in June and July. And then Aging and Long-Term Services is center-based meal program, so where you come and have the lunches and breakfast, but it also includes things like CSA boxes that they'll send home with seniors, or kits, and special events that sometimes they do at the centers where they want to highlight local produce. They've been a really, really great partner in trying to highlight as much local whenever they can. And then the early childhood, the thing I'll say there about that market that's unique is they're looking for very small quantities because they're very small children that don't eat very much. So the serving sizes are small, which make a really great niche market opportunity for producers that have a little bit of product, right? And so the barrier to entry or the paperwork is usually a lot lower with them as well. We talked a little bit about the kind of money coming into the next fiscal year that's available out there. It comes again through a grant program, and what happens is that we run our program on the state fiscal year. Do y'all know what I mean when I say that? So it's July 1st through June 30th, which is kind of confusing when we're looking at the school year, but it's the fiscal year because it applies to all the institutions. So we accept applications right now. We're accepting applications for a July 1st approval, which will take you all the way through the end of June next year. And so the schools, the senior centers, and the preschools also get their money on that fiscal year. So practically speaking, they usually have money in the bank by August and ready to start purchasing for the schools and the preschools. The senior centers, there's been a little more lag there, I would say, on getting the initial money out, but they do purchase a lot in June and July because they're really committed to spending every dime. The schools, they're returning money. There's that much demand out there. They're not using all their money. Money goes back to the state. No one wants money going back to the state. And that's usually because they end their purchasing. They wrap up their purchasing for the year around May so that they can get all their paperwork in. So there's a gap with the schools. I'm going to just be very honest. There's generally a gap with the schools between May and August. Taos does run a summer food program though, and I think there's some potential there. But just so you know the kind of flow. As Mike mentioned earlier, we have a thing called New Mexico Grown Month. So September, October, 50% of the invoices, I used to work at PED. So 50% of the invoices that come in for this program are between August and November. Mostly September and October, because that's when we have the most product. They want to feature it and highlight it, the kids are aware, and so that's where we see a lot of momentum in the schools. The senior centers, again, I think they are also very busy in the fall, but also they have this spring kind of pop, and that particularly for meat products, because they'll do a lot of fresh produce purchasing in harvest season, when they have a lot of money still in the coffers. Any other big trends about demand you would add there?
Nothing on demand as far as that goes, but the only thing I'd like to add to that is our approved supplier list and going through the process and getting on it is not the end-all be-all magic carpet. It's not the crystal ball, the wand, whatever you want to say. It does require some effort from the farmer or rancher to reach out to who you potentially want to sell to. Introduce yourself. Say, hey, I'm going to call up Alena and say, Alena, Mike over here, just want to let you know I'm new to the approved supplier list. I know your monies are not available yet, or don't even mention it, but just say, look, I've got some great sheep, I've got some great cattle, I've got some great etc. And I'd like to be able to help provide product to you. If you want to let me know what you need, maybe I can help customize for your menus. Just stay in contact. It's not that you show up on the list and all your financial woes are over. Yeah. Because if you're going to sit by the phone and wait for it to ring, you're going to grow cobwebs. Let's just be honest. Okay? But it is nonetheless a great tool. And we give you a contact information for every buyer in the state that buys off our list. So it's not like you got to start cold calling people. That's kind of what I have there. So.
Yeah, and I think in terms of meat products, as we touched on, ground meat is big, stew meat is big, things that can be used. Again, you're thinking large-scale food service, so not using prime cuts, which is a benefit, right? Because ideally you can market those prime cuts for a higher dollar to an appropriate market, right? Like, don't send those to institutional food. We heard some circumstances where they were processing prime cuts into things like ground meat. We're like, no, I don't want to hear that, right? Like, so think about what works for your business, but it's a great outlet for those lower grade cuts.
But if you want to grind up ribeye, send it to me.
Yeah, Michael eat your ribeye. I do want to show y'all, and I think I need to turn this thing on. Oh, thanks, Kevin. It's magic. We have a couple of tools, so a few resources that we can make available to you. The list, as we keep talking to, it's not the end-all be-all. As Mike said, it's all about relationships. So I think I mentioned earlier, we do probably quarterly networking events, regionally and statewide. Sometimes they're online, sometimes they're in person. We try to be in person because Real relationships, when you meet someone in person, you're more likely to follow through and remember that person than you are on the Zoom screen. But we do an annual buyer-grower meeting that is required for all approved suppliers. That's usually in February. But otherwise, they're optional events that we host, we put on, we have lunch, we bring buyers, we try to flex as much of our relationships as possible. I want to show you first, there's a website for all this stuff called newmexicogrown.org. So if you want to peruse and understand more about the markets, on here you can find information about, here you can see local food producers, farm to institutions. So I'm going to click on that for a minute to give you guys a sense. Some of the tools that come up onto here include information about their RFAs, but they also like recipes and sample menus. So if you're curious about what you have and how you might be really educated coming into a conversation with the buyer, you can check out this website. We also post our events here. And then the reason I really wanted to bring this up is these documents I'm about to show you, the easiest way to access them at this point is through this website under local food producers. And there's little links in here that will take you to them. But I have them open right now, so I'm just going to show you. What came up around demand that I thought would be relevant is this, which is our allowable product list. And so anything that's on this list, they can use their state funding to purchase. Right now what you're seeing is produce plus category, which is fruits and vegetables and minimally processed fruits and vegetables. The second tab is meat. And essentially, it's every cut of the animals that we mentioned. I'm sorry it's small and I don't really know how to improve that. But you can come and look at this. It just gives you a sense. There's a couple of items like jerky. We do allow jerky, but there's some restrictions on what can be in that jerky. Oh yeah, offal. Surprisingly enough, we had some senior centers that wanted to buy that this year. And so again, think big. Like they'll buy all sorts of product because it comes up to what people want. The senior centers are generally more willing to do things. They're a little more creative because they're working with seniors who are like, this is the food I remember, right? Kids are a little harder in that realm, so I can't recommend enough. So anyways, there's this approved product list you can take a look at. But yeah, beef, bison, pork, lamb bun. And then Mike is referring to the approved supplier list. This is it's more than one list. It's actually 6 lists. But what you're looking at right now is the vendor listing for produce. And so every year we produce this list. It is the tool that you become listed on with your information for buyers. We also now collect information in our application about what you produce quarterly. So if you know that you're going to harvest product only during certain parts of the year, you can let us know that and we'll put it on the list so that buyers know when to reach out to you. So in addition to your phone calls, they really rely on this list, I'm going to be honest. And if you have any sort of social media or website branding information, add it here. We use it to promote your operations and they use it to learn more about you before calling. The meat, we'll go over to the meat list. So again, you can see it lists everything that you provide to us in your application. Every quarter, we relaunch this list with the new updated product availability. So if we have a new vendor, like when one of you come on, that's an opportunity to be like, hey, we got 3 new vendors, here's who they are, check out the list. But we do, again, because we are trying to provide equitable service to everyone, we don't promote any singular operation, but we promote everybody, right? And so we're here to help you with that. Anything else about the list? Scroll on the list. There's more information than you know.
Exactly.
There's the products.
Not promoting doesn't mean we can't tell you this particular hub maybe more geographical, central to you. We're not promoting them over one or the other. We're just stating they're within 50 miles of you, so close to the next one is 150. So that might be the only thing you might see from us. But within that list, it also tells you where they're located, so you can kind of figure that out yourself.
And so the last 3,
Yes, sir.
I was just curious with with you guys traveling the state, if you're seeing certain pockets of the state with niche items that you see that there seems to be an emergence of co-op groups that are more present in one area of the state versus the other, where you've got stragglers in the sense of folks that are coming up onesie, twosie to programs versus folks that are already 10, 20 strong?
Yeah, we were actually just down there last week. Down in the southwestern portion of the state, it's very much 1s and 2s at a time. And it's very much, it's a relationship building process, much like here. It's not what we expected, but it's still a decent turnout. I'd like to see more, but yeah, we have parts of the state, pockets of the state that are a little more, no pun intended here, but a little bit sheepish as to whether they attend the meetings or trust us right away, so it's very much a word of mouth kind of thing.
Yeah, because I mean, again, we're a nonprofit or really function kind of like an NGO in this space, so we're non-governmental, but we're representing governmental programs, which for good reason, people have hesitation around, right? But we do see, a general trend, obviously the Rio Grande corridor, there's more competition, there's more market opportunity, and there's more producers, period. Those things are pretty covered. Again, this quadrant of the state, particularly as we go east from here, is untapped, unmet potential where we can't get product to. There are lots of communities over there on the northeast side that would love to buy meat products and are having a hard time with distribution. So I think collaborating to work together and figure out routes is going to be helpful. There's not a large food hub over there either that's aiding in that. So we're trying to figure out how we can stimulate some distribution, but it might come down to producers working together.
So you're talking Springer, Moda area?
I am, yep.
So I do work with some folks in the Lee County area. And they are very much a loose, unofficial, but official co-op who, it's not that they aggregate their product together, they sell different products. But what they do is they alternate weeks of who does the deliveries. You're delivering this week, she might deliver next week, he'll deliver, So you take 4 farmers and now you've got your week. And then you're carrying invoices for your other farmers, and it works out and it works well for them. This is their 3rd year going into it. And it's been really successful for them, and it shared the burden. So there's, like I said, the official, unofficial cooperatives like that do those type of things, and that's something that could be really successful here. Because like you mentioned, Springer, Wagamama, all these areas of the state here, that where you could get some, even if you aggregated the same product together, it could put you on the approved supplier list. Not that they're gonna need that large of an order, but one might be able to ground beef, the other might have stew meat.
And we're trying to support the agencies and the buyers to do more buyer side coordination, right? Because ideally, if you're going to a specific community, it'd be nice to drop at 3 market outlets, right? Instead of like driving out. So we're trying to support that, but that's also one of the things, that we need to work with producers more on.
Because much like we're doing the producers' education piece of this, we're working twice as hard with the buyers.
Yeah, for real.
Because we're breaking habits when they just picked up the phone and they called Cisco and they got their entire order. And I'll be frank, we're breaking trends of being complacent and lazy because it's just easier to do it that way. And it is really, really, really turning around. I've been really pleased to see where it's gone. But it's I liken it to putting the tires on the race car while we're driving around the track. And we're just it's that approach we're taking. We're getting it going, but as much as we're helping you guys understand the program and the processes, we're doing that on the buyer side too. So we're not just sitting here talking to you. Alena mostly, not every now and then I'm a special guest star, but this lady right here is a rock star when it comes to working with our buyers.
Thanks.
So just know that we are working with that as well. Yeah, Tyler.
I had a question about buyers. So are they pretty much just using the money that's allocated to them by the state to purchase local stuff, or?
So currently they're using the state allocations, the senior centers use their general budget, and now with universal meals in the schools, they're actually gonna be using that, which is it's a lot.
Is that like a federal program?
It's a state program.
Oh, it's state, okay.
That the governor's office pushed through, and it is a monthly reimbursement that they receive when they submit their meal counts. It's based on meal counts, and then they get back, I don't know the exact number yet, but they get back a certain amount in a state grant that they can use freely, and part of that is for procurement. So what they have told us so far is that will actually be an increase above what we've been seeing when it was a standalone grant program, but it's gonna take a little time to work out the kinks. Right now, we know going into next year, they've got rollover funds from this year, so they'll probably have a dedicated $500,000 or so, and then those new funds are gonna come in. So it's, yes, the state grant funds, and then they'll do general purchasing, but for instance, there's some school districts that are actually going above and beyond that to try to create long-term purchasing relationships with processors or producers. So if they really like your product, you have a good relationship that's working out for them, and they can justify the price, they might procure above and beyond that. So it's like the foot in the door, right? Like you're like, hey, I know you got this free money, let's try it out. And then if it works, it sustains. But with universal meals, what we do know is it will require sustainable purchasing relationships because they're going to be required to purchase 3 local products at a minimum a week. And that's minimum. So, and everybody really likes the meat products because they're easy to store, easy to incorporate.
But it's 100% reimbursement of the funds. So yeah, like I know you can't say, you know, how much. You know, I heard last week that like somebody at, you know, this is like hearing somebody say what somebody from the school district said, and they said like, you know, oh, we have like $17,000 to spend a year for like the Taos public schools here.
Yes.
Does that seem about?
That seems low.
Okay, yeah,
that might be what they have left.
I would
Okay,
say that's
okay.
into what they have left. Maybe that is strictly New Mexico grown.
It still
And
seems
they
low for
have-
New Mexico.
Yeah.
It really does, but then they also have their larger, like we talked about NSIP and NSIL, the schools are NSIL.
And it's LP.
NSILP, that they can use those monies on local foods. It's up to their discretion though, because them being federal dollars, the only restriction on that is domestic. And contrary to most people's belief, we are still part of the United States. You know, we're not Mexico, it is New Mexico. So the restriction, only restriction on federal dollars is domestic.
Yeah, and I think, you know, again, they've based the grants on meal count and size of the district, but in the state, no grant. So this year was messed up. Again, from my internal knowledge, I'm like, how much do I share? When I was at PED, the fiscal year before this, no grant was less than $5,000. And that was for the smallest little tiny charter schools, right? So it's not a small amount of money, and going into universal meals, again, we know it will increase. They will get monthly reimbursements that they will be looking to spend to meet the new required, mandated standard. It's not an option anymore. Local food has to come in. The question is, right now they're looking at producing some guidance for the schools to say, hey, you should set aside this much of that budget. And that's what they're working on in rulemaking. And actually the universal meals policy, if anyone loves policy, and staff at TCEDC, I'll mention this, Patty will share it with you, but they're going to be releasing that rulemaking that will dictate what producers how much money, so we can share that with you all. There'll be an open comment process until May, so it'll come out next week to the end of May. Because we're putting it together, but boy, they're really putting it together, right? They're like waiting to finalize the law until the end of May and then implement it in July. So, so we're waiting. But what I want to share with you here is the buyers. So again, full transparency, these are the buyer numbers, these are their emails, we check them and verify them, the agencies themselves provide them to us, let us know if someone left, let us know if there's someone new. This is a senior center one that you're seeing, that's a whole lot of markets, right? So that's senior centers, we've got preschools, new preschools are coming on kind of every month, that one is generally a rolling application. The PED, this is based on last year's, it'll look more like 150 markets as we move into next year. And they come on the list once a year. So recheck it, because new people come in, new contacts come in. If as a producer, you try to call someone in one of these centers and you don't get to who you need, I really appreciate an email to let me know that so that I can update it. Or call them and be like, who's the new person? Because you told a producer there's no one there to take their call. So we do a lot of that too, as Mike was mentioning. So this is the approved supplier list. Again, it's public. As soon as you're a vendor, you'll be listed on here. They'll see you, you can see them, and then we help create events for you guys to connect. The allowable product list we went over. What else? Specifications. I'm going to close this. You want me to go there?
Sure, you're on a roll, go ahead.
Yeah, you go, you start.
Okay, so specifications, what we're talking about, that is gonna be pack size, so generally, they don't want to see anything over, what, 10 pounds, I think, like on ground beef.
Yeah, I think 10 pounds.
You know, the buyer might say, okay, we can take up to a 20, and it has to do with staffing needs and uses. A lot of recipes sometimes don't require more than 10 pounds, particularly in the senior center or early childhood development. So it's buyer driven, what are the specs, and that's something that your buyer can tell you when you're reaching out to them to introduce yourself. What would you like to see? How can I pack that for you? What are your specifications? So, and then it talks about, we're gonna, there's potential case weights. I generally like to, maybe we don't exceed 50 pounds in a total, maybe there's 5 10-pound packages in there. We gotta think about not only safety, but potentially who is doing the cooking and the lifting. And so we wanna look and make sure we're doing that. And then, are we meeting the specifications of what is needed for the buyer? We touched on the grading of the meats. Do they want a 93.7? Do they want an 80-20? Are they like me and want to grill a good burger and they're going to eat 73.27 for the burger? Probably not, but that's, So meeting those specifications, really talking to your buyers to create that relationship. Because that's what's going to have you have a return customer. That's when they're going to call you back and say, man, Mikey really cares about, what my needs are. How do I need it packed? What percentage of fat do I need in my ground beef or my ground whatever? So looking at those things, so.
And we recommend, you set the spec that works for you, that you can consistently deliver, right? It's a little bit of like, know what you need, ask them what they need, find that compromise. So like the pack size is a good example of that. It might be a lot easier for you to do 10 pounds, but if you want to say sell it to the food banks, those are going to families, they need 1 pound. If that's outside of your ability financially, then that's fine, that might not be your market. So then you approach the schools, because they're more at that scale. So know what your bottom lines are when you go into those conversations, because each one is a little bit different. And the food banks are unique in the way that they deal with like family scale, because they're putting it in distributions. Generally, they're looking for frozen product, because they procure it and have to store it, and they have more freezer space than they do fresh refrigeration space in institutional kitchens. I think those are the big ones, pack size, labeling.
You hit it with the food banks. And that one is actually a large market. They do purchase a lot, the food banks, but as Alena mentioned, because those are going out to individual families, they prefer 1 pound size. Now, if you can figure out how to build a model and look at the ROI of it and see what you need to do, that is a really lucrative market to get into and be able to offer them their 1 pound packages that they need for production, so.
And the food banks, while we're talking about it there, so the other thing that food banks do that are unique, I'm not Meredith or Bonnie, so I can't speak to it, but okay, the schools and all the other agencies, you deal with them buyer on buyer, community by community. The food banks, there are 2 people that purchase on behalf of the entire state. So, again, it really behooves you to develop relationships with these 2 folks, Bonnie and Meredith, because they buy on behalf of everyone. And
You said there's only 2 people for the whole state?
For the whole state.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they purchase on behalf of the Association of Food Banks. They're actually employed by the Food Depot, who services up north here as well. So they buy centrally.
And you said that's Bonnie and Meredith?
Bonnie and Meredith, and I will forward you some information for them. They are lovely people.
And they are great ladies to work with. They are really amazing, so.
And they are the ones that are really, really implementing values-based procurement right now. They want to know, are you doing grass-fed finishing? Are you doing land restoration? They want to pay you more for that work. And there are certain food banks that are looking for niche products. So like lamb and mutton out east, they can't get enough of it out there. They would really like, because again, it's up to the families and their culture. So it really is more regionally responsive than like the school food system, for example. They also purchase, because there's 2 of them, they purchase on contract. So what I mean by that is you bid in once a year, and they say, great, you're in our system, now we're going to work with you to see how much we can possibly get, basically, throughout the year. If you don't happen to be awarded a bid, then you go under what's called a micro purchase threshold. So they'll still buy from you, they just can't exceed $20,000 in the year. So if you think, oh geez, I could never even get to that, then you don't need to formally bid in, but you should build a relationship with them. If you think you can work with other producers or yourself and get above 20 grand, bid in, it's worth your time. They're trying to make it, and I say this genuinely, as easy as possible, but it is a procurement bid. it is a little bit complex. But I have seen Meredith take 3-hour phone calls with people to try to work this out. Like, they go above and beyond. Their bid is open right now, and it closes, I'm just looking at an email from her. Oh, it closes May 15th. And they're doing an info session on Monday, this coming Monday at 1:30. So I'll forward this right now to Patty, so that you have it and can send it out to everybody.
Yep.
The info session's not mandatory, but again, if you have any interest whatsoever, we really recommend just taking an hour, jumping on, introducing yourself to them. They will go above and beyond. I told them we were coming here. And Meredith was really excited. She's like, great, tell them about me. I'll be here if anyone needs anything. So again, the food banks, that's an open opportunity right now. It's nice because it's predictable. The other markets are possibly more lucrative because you get more consistent rolling sales, but this is really predictable.
And like we've said, these are amazing ladies doing some amazing work. There's 2 within the state, but I have never seen anybody do more due diligence on looking at the values based on the farmers and the ranchers. I'll get a call, hey, this guy says he does this, does he really? Oh yeah, he's really good. And they're like, okay, cool. And so they do their homework. They do what's needed to make sure that you're getting fair pricing and purchasing from the right people and recognizing regenerative soils, how you treat your cattle or your sheep or however. These 2 women are just, I don't know when they sleep, to be honest, because they are really all about looking into this and making sure that the right people are getting the right monies.
So you can find them, again, I just forwarded Patty the email, so she'll send it to you, but you can look up on the internet, New Mexico Farmers Food Bank, it will come up. They have a website, the RFPs, the applications are on there, that stands for Request for Proposal. Don't be intimidated, there's like 20 of them on there, because they create an RFP for every region. Because they're trying to award as many contracts as possible to get you all in the system. So you might look at it and be like, oh my gosh, which region do I bid into? Or you might be like, good, I only want to serve the North. I know my region. Or hey, I want to go statewide. And so yeah, just when you look at it, don't be intimidated. So she wanted me to tell you that. They're there to help. Call them if you have questions when you look at those RFPs, and they want small amounts. They're totally okay with that. They will move whatever needs moving. So it's directly from her this morning.
I had a question about that.
Yeah, sure.
So that has to be like kind of contracted ahead of time for the whole season, like by May 15th, you need to know what you're going to have for like the next, okay.
Basically, I mean, yes, a competitive RFP would mean that you're committing to, I'm going to deliver this much product, this frequently. That's usually a competitive RFP. In this circumstance, they're just trying to get you in the system as a vendor. So they're going to ask you, what do you think you'll have this year? How do we work with you? They'll get you in, and then they can start purchasing from you on a case-by-case basis. The more clarity you have, the more you can sell to them. But if you're like, gosh, I really don't know quite yet what I'm going to have, I just know during these few months, they'll work with you on that.
So they've got people grandfathered in that are full cycled in, and then we would just be peppered in as just getting.
Nope, it's open right now. So you're up against the folks that were in last year and the year before, and they're looking for new blood.
Yeah, but doesn't necessarily because you did it last year, you're gonna jump to the head of the line. It's,
Yeah.
what are your values? How are you still operating?
And that's
are
what
you
they
doing?
really truly care about the most. They really want to support small producers that are doing things that benefit the land, that are doing things that benefit our communities. And yes, that can deliver consistent product when it's needed, but again, they do a great job of patchworking that from multiple producers. So again, check them out, they're a great resource.
So I guess, to clarify that question is that for the competitive bids, they've got high volume, essentially folks that are previous year before that they're looking for new blood, and they'll just kind of pepper us in when we reach out to them.
Yeah, well, we've got less than a handful of producers, or maybe a handful of producers that are high volume, but the nice thing about them is they don't let them monopolize the state either.
Right, so they don't purchase a max amount from any one
They
producer.
will say, okay, just because you can provide me 100,000 pounds of ground beef this year, I'm not gonna buy it all, I'll buy 10,000 pounds. And then they're gonna move on to the next producer, so they're not gonna let the bigger guys that we have monopolize the program.
So yeah, they'll pepper you in where your availability of product is.
And the nice
then
thing,
they'll structure it.
yeah, and the nice thing about them also is if you tell them you're gonna have X poundage you predict for this season, and I mean, we could have predicted the fires that happened up here this last year, and all of a sudden you can't meet what your projections were, that's okay. You're not in default of nothing, life happens, unfortunate things happen. So it's not like you're in breach of a contract or anything, it's just, you know, there was a fire, I mean, there was whatever reason it could be, so don't feel like I can't say, well, I can provide you 100 pounds a week or whatever, and then feel like you're gonna be in breach of a contract if you can't. It's just, all we ask on that portion of it is just stay in communication. Hey, you know what, I've had this situation happen, I'm gonna be out of production for about 3 weeks. I'll be able to pick it back up then. And they're gonna be like, okay, great, we'll talk to you in 3 weeks. And on pricing, yeah, you're bidding in, but much like the agriculture, it's not set in stone either. If there's a sudden market value shift or, you know, and all of a sudden you're $5 a pound and we got the last 3 cows on the earth is now worth whatever dollars, that's also can come into effect. So these are just structures that they work under.
And within their RFP, I believe they have a fluctuation of up to 15% in the year for price increases that a producer can submit. Hey, the cost of fuel went up. It's gonna cost me that much more to get it to your feed or whatever. So built into those, for any of you that love contracts, built into that fine print contract language, there are things like that. And so again, it's more of almost like a request for interest than it is honestly an RFP, if any of you are familiar with procurement. I do want to emphasize one thing that Mike brought up, which is with every one of these markets, the way they determine if a vendor is someone they want to keep working with is 2 things. Are they responsive? In other words, did they tell me what I asked for? Did they give me pricing information, availability information? It doesn't matter what that information is. Are you being responsive to the spec they put out, the needs they have when they reach out to you? Are you responding to their emails and requests? And then are they being responsible? Are you staying to the standards you said you would? Are you fulfilling agreements that you've made? Again, they kind of overlap, but those are the 2 magic words in institutional procurement, responsive and responsible. And if for some reason you're deemed not doing either one of those, they probably won't want to keep doing business with you. So that's their language that they literally are audited by with the USDA. Are they responsive and responsible? And so it takes a lot of forms of how those can look. We did want to mention how these conversations generally start. So the food banks, let's set that aside because they do this kind of contract process, but you can still reach out to them year round if you choose not to do the RFP. So generally you're going to reach out to them, as Mike said, or they're going to reach out to you if they found you on the list, and they're going to say, hey, where are you? What do you have? How much do you have? What's a price you might have? And are you going to distribute to us? Those are always the first questions. I like to counter, and we actually have this on the New Mexico Grown website, there's a micro purchase worksheet that has all those fields that they actually document, and then they put it along their procurement to the state. And the second thing is an interview tool. I like to counter when I start a conversation with a buyer, why do you do what you do? Because you know what, you get to the humanity, and they're like, because I love my community and I care about my kids, or because I saw people eating crappy food, and you're like, great, I can help you with that. I've got this great product, blah, blah, blah. So it's also about finding that human relationship connection and honoring that they're more than the institution they represent, right? Like we're picking on institutions, but behind them are amazing community members and family members and neighbors. And so I have seen time and time again that starting with that tone, starting with those questions, leads to a much more fruitful conversation. The thing I want to caution, especially with some of the larger districts, you might call and be like, who do I actually call? There's a phone number on this list. They are the food service director. The food service director runs the whole show, right? So they oversee labor, they oversee purchasing, but they might be like, you know what, we don't actually do the ordering. It's our kitchen manager that does that. So if they sound like they don't know what they're talking about, you can be like, who's your kitchen manager? Do you think you could share their information with me? Sometimes they also have schools, particularly have something called a food service management company. Has anyone ever heard of that? They use a third party, like Chartwell's, what's one, Desert something is like Hatch, TRC. There's another big one that does a lot of the small districts in the state. So they'll be kind of organized. It's a business that they contract out with to run their entire food service. And so it might not be a school district employee you're talking to. So if that feels confusing to you, you can ask, are you a food service management company? Great, okay, now I know how to work with you. But they still apply for the funds. If they're on the list, they are aware of the program. The third thing is, they might be like, that's not my decision, you have to talk to the fiscal person. So This is the cast of characters in institutional food. The fiscal person is the one that's gonna take your paperwork. They're gonna, if they want a W-9 from you, it's gonna be the fiscal person you send it to, and they're the one that oversees the contract, if there's a contract, or your vendor relationship as a whole. So there's kind of 3 people you'll engage with. Food service director, that's the one you wanna really like get in with on the personal level. The kitchen manager, they know what they actually use. They know what they wanna buy, they know, quantities, because they actually produce the meals daily. And the fiscal person, who oversees how you get paid. And we have heard this, and it was a problem a couple of years ago that Mike and I were very upset about. Payment terms on invoices can lag really badly because they're used to large vendors. So there were some schools that were, they had 90-day payment terms on their invoices. And we're like, that doesn't work for a small producer. So make sure you cover that when you do get to that stage of your relationship, when you're talking actual finances. Make sure you assert your payment terms. If it's net 30, tell them that and really work with them on that. And I know the agencies are trying to hold them more to that as well. Because we all find it completely unacceptable. So, yeah.
I would say that's industry standard for the most part is net 30. So just be aware of that going into that you need to be able to go out 30 days without receiving a check when product goes out. They've gotten so much better, and we don't have the same problem we had 2 years ago. All the issues have been addressed. But also, make sure it's on your invoice. Because guess who signed your invoice? They do. So now they've acknowledged, they've received a good quality product on April 20th, 21st, whatever. And on your invoice on the bottom, it says net 30. So now they have just signed something that states they will pay you within 30 days. And if you have an issue with that, it's not necessarily always my job, but I will make that phone call for you. I'm like, why have they not gotten a check? This is where Alena and I got involved a couple years ago because it became egregious for a couple of, I will say, southern area districts and counties that they were just, it was not right, it was not fair. And we got involved and started yelling and screaming, and we took it way up the chain and they got it fixed. But make sure your invoices, I can't state it enough. 1 has your FSIS number on there. 2 states term net 30. Okay? Because then they, like I said, they signed that. And now they've had an agreement. And I'm sorry if it was the lowly cook or dishwasher that signed that agreement, that's their fault. They didn't train that person to either properly put the invoice away, whatever. You have now a contract with them that you will be paid within 30 days.
So for the invoicing, the other requirement is that you list pounds on there. So even though you might be selling in units, they're going to want to book it down into pounds as well. So that's where your spec comes in. So you're selling 5 units at 10 pounds. You should indicate that clearly on the invoice. Ideally, call the product New Mexico grown just for the sake of whatever bookkeeper comes across that invoice and doesn't know. Because again, you're dealing with a system. So like in a rural district, gosh, it might be all the same person, and that's lovely when that happens because it's so much easier. But often we're talking multiple people that don't have the same amount of information about the program. So make sure your invoices are thorough and include those items. Also your invoice numbers, I know this is like basic, but again, if it comes to traceability and recall, generate a different invoice number, make sure that that's tracked on your side. I have seen invoices that have duplicate numbers as someone that was receiving them at PED. I was like, oh, this is a problem. Right? Like, this is not okay.
You can't have 3 invoices number 17.
Yeah, don't do that. Please, I don't care about the numbers, just don't make them the same. Any questions about invoicing?
I would also like to throw out there, if you were wanting to, this is maybe down the road for you, but we do have a logo that we're willing to share with you if you ever wanted to put it on your invoices or whatever, and it draws the eye, and we are teaching our buyers and et cetera to recognize this, and it doesn't, it's not our name or yours, it just simply states New Mexico Fresh Local. Okay, and we have taught them and they're being educated on that logo. And we will provide that to you in a PDF form or whatever with no charge. So, and they can't come take it from you, nobody, because we own it. And we're not going to do that.
So you call up a buyer, they ask you a few questions, you're like, yeah, okay, we could do business. Then they're going to say, we got to set you up as a vendor in the system. That is different in every one of these markets because it's locally determined. Thank goodness. It's a good thing that it's locally determined. It's also a bit of a hassle. Generally though, they want a tax document at a minimum. They just do because they have to report it unless you're doing like a one-off really small purchase. But they're gonna want a tax document. They'll probably have some paperwork for you to fill out on their end. That might look a little bit like a micro purchase worksheet or a quote. Like they might take a quote from you on the phone, type it up and send it back to you. That's for their documentation to the federal government and to the state. So I just want to clarify that you will have to get set up as a vendor in the system and don't let that throw you off too badly. If it feels burdensome, reach out. And also on the back of your flyers, there's contact information for the agency people. Ophelia with Aging is amazing. She will talk you through it, not a problem. PED, where they're hiring someone new right now. Shauna's not there anymore, but they will have someone new and we can share with you Mike Chavez's information. Lauren Miller at TCEDC is a good resource. He can connect you with his colleague Laura. So again, those are real people. They all are invested in this program. If you're having an issue, reach out to them. Sometimes it's faster to reach out to me though. And I will deal with them too because I have buyer relationships. So can't recommend enough, but don't be deterred by them saying, you know, it's going to take us 30 days to get you in the system as a vendor, and predict that it will. Know that it will take a couple of weeks at least to get you just enrolled in their system so they can cut you a check. That's what they have to do to pay you.
This is a question really for the room, because I'm not a farmer and a rancher, but our situation here in Taos County seems to be that you make a reservation a year ahead to slaughter your cattle, or one cow, maybe, just small, but, and then you have to drive them, hundreds of miles to get to the place where they're processing them. So this seems like this is very future for Taos County, because how can you say I can provide this many? I mean, there's so many variables until we actually have meat processing here that we can predict. How can a farmer actually get into and use this system? I mean, this is great to know about and be prepared for, but am I all wrong that this is pretty futuristic for Taos?
No, you're wrong. I'll just be honest with you.
Yeah.
You're wrong.
Okay.
Because, well, here's why, I didn't mean to be that blunt.
No, that's fine.
Sorry,
I want
that's just how I am. Don't be wrong at that. You're wrong because the fact now it does require a little bit of legwork on it. How's the processing facility going in Antino, Colorado? Do they have space for you? There's other ones, there's 5 now within the state that are not necessarily monopolized or backed up by some of the bigger guys. Now, is it perfect? No. But then there's also over the border in Texas. There's these places you can go and then receive your product back. You'll be able to transport it back safely, just like we mentioned, either in coolers, have it arranged for refrigerated, be bringing it over, however it is. So to say that we can't predict right now, you're kind of wrong on it because of the fact that you can find out, can I get in the next 60 days?
We've been hearing anecdotally that it's getting better in terms of some of the flows with some of the plants, that the wait lines aren't as long. And, yes, you can do that. You can also decide, I'm going to use Durango. I'm going to go process at Sunnyside Meats. Boy, that's far away. I'm going to process it and then deliver it to San Juan Food Hub so that I don't have to pay the processor to market my product because they're in Colorado, but then San Juan could get it. The odds of them moving it back into Taos County might not be perfect. So in terms of the hyper-local, all processed, delivered in Taos County, yeah, that's future-facing. But using some of the regional partnerships, you can still participate in the market where there's a lot of demand. And right now the food hubs are working together that are on board actually as part of an emerging food hub network to share distribution and routing so that they can market things together. So there's a lot of things happening. So I'm not going to be as categorical if you're wrong. I think you're right on the hyper-regional ideal model, but there's still an opportunity for you to get your feet wet, test out these markets, and then be ready to come to Taos when the capacity's here so that Taos can do it so well and so right when the processing capacity is here. But yeah, we are hearing more and more that the processing backlog is not as bad, actually, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. But also on the list of vendors are the processors, and you can see there any of the processors are USDA certified. Have frank conversations with them, figure out what they're charging you, figure out, before you just drive across the street to have them process the meat, but they are on there as well.
Well, thank you, because I was missing this middle part of how to get from.
Yeah, there's
here
like,
to there.
and you can process your meat, it's not ideal, but if you have storage here at TCEDC, you can get things processed when you can and then market it throughout because it's in a frozen state. And there's lots of opportunity. So, we're not necessarily at the stage of processing per market demand yet. Hopefully someday, that'll be amazing. But right now, there are these different opportunities and outlets, so.
Great, thank you.
She's nicer than I am. Sometimes I see a little more cut and dry to that, but also, part of this is on you, as soon as you put these applications in and go through the steps and requirements, sooner we can get you into the system, then you can start planning it out, seeing what your market's gonna look like, and then start contacting buyers in your area and letting them know, and getting predictions from your buyers. Are they wanting to do business with you? And then you can go to your processors and say, how long out is it before I can bring in 3 head of sheep or 3 cattle or whatever, maybe it could be 10, it could be 20, whatever. But talk to find out what your processors in your area that makes fiscal sense for you to use them. And then you can start building it out that way.
I'm just curious, if everything under the sun from lamb, sheep, cows, what is the most unique offering within the Mexico?
That people are buying?
Yes.
For me, it'd be golf balls.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of schools that bought some tripe to do menudo and things like that, so that's fairly unique. Again, when I was developing the allowable products list, we also put lamb in primal cuts or whole animals, because particularly out in Navajo Nation and some of the tribal areas, that's how they want to receive it for cultural purposes, and so those are unique outliers that are cool opportunities, because who else is going to take a primal cut? Right? Like, that's not common. But
That speaks to the older generation, like
Yeah.
my grandma, like the lambs had.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
Very few people nowadays I know the reaction, most people, I don't know about that. But, my grandma cracks a smile.
Yes.
So, it's just one of those things, so everything's relative to.
And it's getting paired, so all of this work about what we call local procurement is getting paired with nutrition education and cultural education. So in schools, that's where we're seeing it most robust, but the senior center too. And so they're trying new recipes. They're talking about more input from the seniors using these meals. It's all part of a bigger movement. And so it's complemented in that way. And I can't recommend enough, if you have marketing materials, share them front and center, because they use those, every one of the centers use them, and every one of the schools, they want that. So that's a real unique way to differentiate yourself, on the list, so to speak. Other questions about kind of working with the institutional markets? And one thing I want to offer is, when there's readiness up here, again, we're happy to come up and host a regional networking event. We'll gather all the buyers we know. We'll gather all the producers. We do this where there's capacity. Right now, I feel like we're still kind of getting here in Taos, but we can help to make some of those relationships come to life as part of our work with TCEDC. So.
Any other questions? I got one more for you then. So we're gonna be back up here over the next couple of years or so, doing, I think, 5 more of these. And we wanna make them learning shops. So today was the introduction of the marketing, the approved supplier program, and et cetera. What are some of the other things that you would like to see maybe in the next event? Where we can bring other guest speakers that maybe have more knowledge in another area that we don't necessarily have. Do you have ideas, thoughts?
I think workshops on business plans would be really great.
Okay.
I agree with that, maybe coupled with one of the, if someone perhaps is willing to come from the New Mexico Grow umbrella where they handle the logos and graphics and such.
Okay.
That have access to the
Yep.
graphic artists behind the scenes.
Perfect.
Yeah, that would probably be somebody out of NMDA maybe.
Yeah, Alena.
Yeah, so.
Yes,
I know you had some thoughts too. Did you have more? I'm sorry.
go ahead. I also think that as part of the conversation about value added, what is the language that's used about soil health? Because the farmers might be talking a lot about that, but do the people who do procurement really understand the value of that? And what words are they using? Like for red writing, that'd be useful information.
What I can speak to there is we're working right now on a pilot pilot around values-based procurement with the Kavera Coalition, and we're developing a food charter that would define what some of those metrics are. And that's gonna be taking form over the next 6 to 9 months, I think, a draft of that charter. So it'll start to give us common language, and happy to share it. I think Kavera could be a great resource around that, and then also, all the programming that they provide and resources.
She just mentioned one of the things that we were talking about.
So you were, okay, because that was another big one you and I were talking
Yeah.
about, soil and regenerative soils and
Okay,
how it applies to ranching as well.
great.
The only other thing I'd mention is, if you can bring somebody up that is, can give some ideas about financing for production.
Okay.
Like resources?
Like grants, loans, what are we talking, infrastructure, equipment?
Anything, just directing people like the PCA arrangements or commercial banking or whatever.
I also think that if there could be some way that people who have the different pieces of infrastructure could be coordinated so that not each small operation has to buy everything. So sharing of infrastructure, a system of like-minded individuals who have an agreement about the necessity of taking care of things, and some way to formalize that could be interesting.
So that just happened on the grants that I was talking about. Alena and I were on the reviews. So by signing up with Grow the Tradition, you're eligible for those. And the ones I was involved with, and even with her on the equipment side, there was a couple of them that were full infrastructure grants where farmers were co-oping together to build the facility shared by all.
Yeah.
So that is out there, so that's good. Anything else, something you'd like to hear, or no? You just here for the Frito pie?
I was talking about taxes and, that kind of stuff, so.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is 4 out of 5, 6? How many points we got there?
I have 5.
Okay, so,
6, kind of.
okay, well, 5.5, 4 out of those 5.5 there have to do with financial. Business, taxes, access to monies.
We have a August 17th event with the Tinney Corporation that helps you tell about EIN numbers and protecting and their
I was at the
financial.
last one, that was a great one.
Oh, yeah, yes, you were here, that's right, yeah, so they're coming back again to do that one here, August 17th.
Well, then maybe we could look at what isn't covered in that 17th meeting and the restructure, what our next event looks like. Yeah, because I know the marketing side we can help you with.
The value that's soil health and food charter stuff.
Right.
That's
Well,
probably gonna need to look a little later in the season, but yeah, we can definitely,
Yeah.
bring a coalition of folks to talk about that.
So just realize these are 5.5, 6 great topics. Probably not all gonna be in the next meeting because we want to allow time for each topic. So I think we want to prioritize, what I'm seeing is the financial side of it, but we'll look at what comes out of the August 17th meeting, minus the marketing piece of it, which we know that, I think that'd be a great idea to maybe include on the next one. Bring up somebody from NMDA that can really help. And then we'll look at what other finance things maybe wasn't covered in your August meeting, and we can kind of fill it around that. Does that sound fair and reasonable for everyone?
That's great.
Great. Okay, so now we're gonna close, but I have one question for you. Are there any fears that came up today? Is there anything you're leaving with that's like, ooh, that still feels sticky or a little scary? So we know to address it.
That was very helpful, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Anything? Tyler?
I would just say, it seems like marketing to the institutions almost seems like direct marketing in a way.
Yeah.
But maybe at a lower price point than you could otherwise do direct marketing directly to the end buyer who might be willing to pay more.
It's direct marketing in the sense of what's like having a lot of brand integrity and representing your own product and all of that, but the volumes that we're talking really are wholesale, and that's where the pricing comes in, but you're also moving a lot of product at any given time, so what would you say?
Yeah, it's not farmer's marketing pricing,
Yeah.
you know, but it is a good, fair market value for a New Mexico raised product. We're making sure that, and by direct marketing, direct sales, you don't have the middleman in the way. And you have the opportunity to use free storage here, so there's no upcharge there. So that extra money that would normally go to a middleman, or you're having to really drop your price because you're trying to sell to a grocery chain, that doesn't exist now. You're getting a good, solid price for what you do. And this is where it's gonna make you economically more stable or flush with cash, however you wanna phrase it. We're putting more money actually in your pocket by doing the direct sales. So are you getting a farmer's market price of $20 a pound? No. But you're also gonna get maybe $12 a pound and sell 10 times as much.
But
So-
you're correct in the way that the market functions, as it is user to user. However, you have options to not. You can work through a hub, or you can have a processor market your product for you. So those are the opportunities. If you're like, I don't have time to do direct and I don't care about taking the hit, those are two other pathways for you. Food hubs, I'm going to promote that because they support a lot of regional food system activity development. We love our food hubs. They support the smallest growers. And then, again, also the processors market on behalf of folks. And as more distributors come in, so there will be pathways for more of, a different path. But yeah, right now, we really do like to promote it in that direct relationship as much as possible.
And the center here will soon be your biggest ally, like it already is, because they are working on becoming a food hub for you here. And they're gonna have transportation and all these other different things where you can just sell it in here now, let them be your end customer, and then they take care of distribution. Or whatever model, they may choose a model where they just carry your invoice too. So depending on how they want to do it, but you're soon to have your own local food hub here. So it just depends on your model and that, so. Do you have anything, sir?
Good.
No?
Kevin?
Jennifer?
Well, I want to ask about food hubs, but maybe that's another subject. I don't know.
Well, what do you want to know?
Well, I don't, are there any in our area? I mean, I really don't know.
In Taos, no.
Right.
Probably the most northern, would you say Nina is?
Would you say that's really a hub?
No. So probably right now,
What happened to New Mexico Harvest?
they are still around in a different capacity.
Just really scaled
They've
back.
had
Yeah.
to scale back, they've lost their larger building due to some issues, so they've had to restructure. They are still around and a player. They're providing New Mexico meals into schools now and doing a CSA.
But they used to drive all the way up to
Yeah.
about Dixon or so. Is that as far
Yeah,
north
they
as
used
they
to
can?
do to Dixon and they'd sell into SIDS and they did a lot
Yeah,
out here, but they had to restructure. But we still have down there, we have the Lamanita Co-op, there's Agriculturas down there. So, but as far as anything close to you, Jennifer, your question is, the answer is no, okay, you guys are there?
Yes.
No pressure?
There's La Manita, Agricultura, and then San Juan County. And you guys are,
Yeah, those are,
that's the landscape.
yeah, those are,
Okay, food hubs, this is an opportunity, so
Yeah.
we're
No,
gonna
it's-
know more.
definitely, then the others we have down south, or they're in Las Cruces and Silver City and Anthony and, so we're trying to build this network around the state. And, right now, this is a great crucial point, and Mercedes and her team have been really working on putting something together for a much needed service in this part of the state, so stay tuned.
Well, thank you all again for
Thank
sharing
you.
Saturday with us, a beautiful Saturday. We appreciate you. Tiana, was there anything? I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Saturday,
let's go.
I forgot she was even here.
reach out to us if anything comes up, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.